Hey guys, anime fanfics here. This is chapters 29 to 34 of Obito's redemption story by Yaboy Assassin on Wattpad. Links to all stories are in the description below, and make sure to like and subscribe to my channel. Chapter 29. Naruto watched as Shizune was still healing Sasuke. She had told him that he had been poisoned, and before he could worry told him that Sasuke, somehow, had some small immunity to poison, though it still affected him. And done. Shizune smiled at her work as she cut off the chakra from her technique. Is he healed now? Naruto asked as Shizune turned to him. Yes. She answered before turning back to Sasuke as he groaned. He should be waking up now. Just after she said that, the Uchiha silently opened his eyes, blinking a couple of times due to the sunlight. Hey, idiot. The Uchiha called out. Is that you? I'm not an idiot. Naruto yelled angrily before crossing his arms. That's the first thing you say to the person that saved you, Naruto muttered. Sasuke rolled his eyes as he sat up. He was about to retort when the ground shook violently, almost causing him to fall over. Naruto wobbled like an idiot, his voice changing from it. Shizune, on the other hand, was still as one could be, glaring in the direction she thought it was coming from. When it stopped, she turned to them. Come on, boys. We have to head out to help. As everyone got up, Sasuke called out for them to stop. Did any of you see an Akatsuki member? He was the one I was fighting. Sasuke said when the two stopped and looked back at him. Shizune shook her head. No. I had been watching Naruto train and helped when he was attacked by Orochimaru's right-hand man. Orochimaru? Sasuke put a hand to his chin. I've heard that name before. He was the one who gave me this cursed seal. He pulled down his collar and turned his neck so the two could get a better look at it. The other two looked at it. Naruto did because he never got a good look at it, and Shizune because it was by Orochimaru and she was worried about what was it for. Anyway, she stepped back as Sasuke turned back to the two normally. You said this Akatsuki were the ones to attack you. Any reason why? Sasuke nodded. Yes. He turned to Naruto, who had a rather relaxed stance despite the situation. They were after you, Naruto. Naruto gaped as his stance fell from its relaxed state. Huh? Why would they be after me? Beats me, Sasuke answered with a small shrug. All I know is that it's important since they were aiming to make me talk and fight your perverted teacher. Naruto and Shizune thought about the new information that they'd just received. Sasuke, you said you saw them fighting, right? Take me to Pervy Sage. I don't want him to die because of me. Before Sasuke could answer, Shizune spoke up. No, Naruto. They're after you and we'll be making it a lot easier for them to get you if we bring you to them. I have to go. They'll come for me eventually, and if they don't catch me on a mission like this, then they'll come to Konoha where everyone will be put at risk. We have to defeat the here and now. Naruto argued. I see your point, Shizune told him. But even then, this doesn't require you to come along. You should hide somewhere while the rest of us take care of it. Before Naruto could retort, Sasuke stepped in. That's not smart, Sasuke told her. How come? You said that with the addition of those Akatsuki members, Orochimaru and his right-hand man are here as well. Without Naruto, we're at a major disadvantage. All there is right now, excluding Naruto, would be you, the perv, and I versus two Akatsuki members and Orochimaru with his right-hand man. I'm likely no match for either of them, and with a little less than half my chakra, I won't be doing much. So that'll just leave you and the perv. Sasuke explained. You didn't add in my master, Tsunade-sama. She told him. She's a Sannin just like Master Jiraiya and Orochimaru. She won't factor in much, regardless of her presence or not, Sasuke told her bluntly, not caring if she felt insulted by it or not. I know that because of how much sake bottles were on the table, and by the look on your face from that time at that restaurant you didn't look surprised. That most likely meant that you were used to seeing that for a long time. Yeah. Naruto agreed. You didn't follow anything I said, did you?" Sasuke asked, giving him an amused look. Naruto chuckled with his natural bright grin. "Nope." Sasuke chuckled with him as Shizen looked amazed at the Uchiha's deduction. "I guess I have nothing to retort back," Shizen told them as she sighed. "Just please be careful, okay?" "Yes, ma'am." Naruto saluted as Sasuke did his signature Uchiha grunt and nodded his head. With that, the three headed out, hoping to find Jiraiya. Triple X. "That's quite the battle," Kabuto commented as he looked over the edge of a broken building. He had expected something big to go down considering there were 3 Sannin and 2 Akatsuki members present, but with how the town looked as of now, he'd say this was a bit out of hand. Killing Naruto to stop the Akatsuki's plans has to be on hold, for now at least. He hopped from building to building, some crumbling after he jumped. As he looked for his master, tremors made other buildings collapse around him, including some in front of him. Stopping on the building he was on, he looked down before his eyes widened. He flipped back on instinct just as the executioner's blade soared through the air. Kabuto has no doubt it would have cut his head off had he not moved. "Lord Orochimaru!" Kabuto yelled, spotting his master getting slammed into what was left of a building. The building collapsed in a loud heap as Kabuto rushed forward in hopes of reaching him. His attempt was dashed when Juzo came into view, aiming a kick. Not having enough time to dodge, Kabuto could only block as Juzo slammed his foot on him. Kabuto skidded to a halt, kicking up dirt and dust from the action. "I knew you'd be here eventually," Juzo told him as cracked his neck. "I and my partner knew about Orochimaru being here, as well as his plans." Juzo walked to him, stopping a couple of meters in front of him. "How do you know so much?" Kabuto asked, a drop of sweat rolling down the side of his face. "That's not something you need to know," he said, preparing to attack him. Kabuto's body stiffened as a result of the move. He knew he wouldn't be able to handle Juzo if Orochimaru couldn't, despite him not having arms. Just before Juzo could make a move, Kabuto told him to stop. Juzo raised an eyebrow in silent question. He hoped the guy wouldn't wimp out and beg for his life. "Let's make a deal. I'll tell you where the Nine Tails is and what are they doing here, and in turn, you let me and Lord Orochimaru go." Outwardly, Juzo looked as if he wasn't taking the offer too seriously, but on the inside, he was considering the offer. The only reason he and his partner were here was to capture the Nine Tails. With the destruction of the town, it was no doubt that it would put the Akatsuki on everyone's radar, something the leader didn't want. If they went back empty-handed, they would no doubt be in trouble. Especially considering how the leader had no tolerance. Juzo angrily muttered under his breath before giving his attention to Kabuto. "Tell me." Kabuto opened his mouth to say something, but Juzo interrupted. "I've got the advantage here. Tell me now before I change my mind and kill you." Kabuto's mouth closed with an audible click, a mix of annoyance and anger clear on his face. But a ghost of a smirk was ever present. Kabuto told him what they were doing here first, something Naruto had told him. "Okay. Now, where is he?" Kabuto smirked as his gaze fell upon the sky just as a group consisting of Shizune, Sasuke, and Naruto with the former leading. "They're right there." "I guess a deal is a deal," Juzo told him, but his eyes followed the group as they landed on another building, disappearing. "If we meet again, I'll kill you." With that, Juzo collected his sword before rushing in the same direction the group just went. "Sorry, Juzo-san." Kabuto mused, pushing up his glasses. "But I think you've got that a bit twisted." His gaze hardened in thought before a groan broke through it. He ran to the recently collapsed building, attempting to retrieve his master and retreat. Triple X. Kisame stared down at the 2 Sannin as Tsunade got into a fighting stance. A grin of anticipation surfaced on his face as his sword wiggled a bit, wanting even more chakra. Tsunade glared at the smirk, she seeing it as arrogance. "This is the end of your Sannin." Kisame bellowed, his dense, heavy chakra producing a strong wind. Dust riled up as Kisame charged at the 2, chakra thrusting him forward. Tsunade responded, reeling back her fist just as he came in sight. That was what Kisame was hoping for. He twisted his body, bringing his special sword in front of it, hoping to slice the Sannin in half. Tsunade sidestepped, barely dodging the attack. Jiraiya leaped back, not wanting to get caught in the crossfire. Tsunade leaped back into the fight with a chakra-infused fist ready. She slammed her fist into his abdomen, but instead of flying back, he turned into water. The original Kisame appeared behind her, thrusting his arm forward. Water style, water shark bomb jutsu. Water that transformed into a sizable shark slammed into her just as she crossed her arms to defend herself. The impact picked up dust, but it cleared quickly, revealing an uninjured Tsunade. Her wounds must have healed. Kisame told himself, lifting his sword over his shoulder. Tsunade glared intensified as she slammed her fist into the ground, causing the ground to uproot and the remaining buildings in the area to collapse. She picked up a large boulder in one hand and her other hand was a large part of a roof. "This place is perfect for me to let loose," she told him before chucking both of the objects in her hands at incredible speeds. Kisame sliced through them with ease but had no time to breathe as Tsunade, with a larger part of a building in her hands, was right upon him. He leaped away just before she slammed the building down. He weaves through hand signs as he sailed through the air, watching his surroundings as he did. He weaved the last one as Tsunade chucked a large foundation at him. Water style, surface slicer. Water spurted from the ground, shooting up to the sky, slicing the larger foundation in half. Debris and dust flew through the air but it didn't detour Tsunade, who charged through it, reeling back another chakra-infused fist. Kisame grunted, taking out his sword in an attempt to cut her down. Deciding to take the hit, slammed her fist into his abdomen just as his sword impaled her in the shoulder. "Ugh!" Kisame grunted as he slammed into the ground. Samahata sailed past him, landing dozens of meters away. Kisame slowly picked himself up, wiping blood that spurted from his mouth from the impact. Tsunade landed on the ground in a heap. She was breathing hard with her pupils dilated, looking at the blood that coated her shoulder. Her breathing became harder and more vigorous as she looked at the blood. It's a shame that a Sannin has so died like this. Kisame started as he suddenly appeared behind her, a kunai replacing Samahata. "I hope you remembered, for the coward you are." The kunai swung down and would have sliced the back of her neck if spiky white hair didn't stop the kunai in its tracks. "This is as far as you go," Jiraiya said just as more of his hair flew towards the Akatsuki member. It was blocked by Juzo's executioner's blade, using it as a shield. "Damn it, where did he come from?" Jiraiya retracted his hair as the team of Shizune, Naruto, and Sasuke landed in front of Tsunade. "Oh? The Uchiha is up already," Juzo said, not turning around to take his eyes off the Sannin. Sasuke got into a fighting stance as his eyes narrowed. If this guy wanted a round two, he would get one. Kisame roughly grabbed Tsunade, positioning a kunai to her throat. "No one move. If anyone does, she is dead." Everyone but the Akatsuki members froze at the threat, causing Juzo to chuckle a bit. "Now, you tell us which one of you is the Jinchuriki and then we'll let her go." "Kisame, I already know," Juzo said, turning to his partner briefly. "It's the one with the stupid orange jumpsuit on." At that, Naruto visibly flinched in anger. "It's not stupid," Naruto yelled. Just as he did, the landscape started to change from solid ground into the mud under the Akatsuki's members' feet. "What the hell?" Juzo yelled as Jiraiya leaped over him and using the two toads' tongues that were now on his shoulder to push Kisame away from Tsunade while the other one grabbed her. Jiraiya landed back on the ground in front of Naruto with Tsunade in hand. Wind style, immense breakthrough. Both Akatsuki members expelled a strong gust of wind, blowing back the mud. The pressure from the wind caused everyone but Jiraiya to cover up. Dust picked up soon after the fact, covering the area. "Jiraiya boy, what's going on for you to summon us?" Fukusaku asked a bit hurriedly as he was just at home relaxing before being summoned out of nowhere. "A lot," Jiraiya answered vaguely, knowing he didn't have enough time to explain the entire situation. So he chose to summarize it. "I'm here to bring Tsunade back with me to be the Hokage." He continued, ignoring the surprise that sounded from both the toads on his shoulders. I've got Naruto with me, and these two people are from the Akatsuki. Their mission is to capture him alive. Both toads nodded at the information, taking it in. They must be very tough opponents for you to need Sage Mode. Jiraiya hummed with a nod. Of course. I wouldn't have called you if I didn't need to. I know you have the things that you do. Shima's reply to his answer was cut short when chakra burst from the dust cloud, blowing it away. Both the Akatsuki members stood with hardened eyes, ready for anything that could be thrown at them. A soft breeze fluttered the clothes and hair of everyone in the area as a tense silence surrounded them. Juzo stepped forward and Kisame called out for his weapon. I'll take the others, he told his partner, briefly looking over his shoulder. He knew how his partner acted and knew that Kisame wouldn't want to end the fight halfway. So he had to suck up his wanna fight the Sannin, reluctantly, to get what they came here for, the Kyuubi. You focus on keeping the Sannin off my back. Kisame grinned as Samahata returned to his side. He took a look at the person he'd been fighting for quite a while, observing the changes he could see. Kisame could see that the man had changed into something more frog-like, and with how much his sword was fidgeting, he knew that it wasn't just his looks that had changed. No, Jiraiya told them, his voice serious and stern. His eyes held the fierceness that came with his status. I'm your opponent. You'll both be fighting me. Juzo raised an eyebrow, an amused expression making its way onto his face. Oh, he said in a mocking tone. I didn't know I had to ask permission to kill your comrades. My mistake. I need all of you to get out of here. Jiraiya yelled suddenly, ignoring the protest that quickly surfaced from Naruto. I'll handle them from here. You'll only get in the way. Sasuke seemed to be processing the information, letting it run through his head. Naruto was about to yell out until Shizen stopped him. Naruto. Shizen interrupted, and he turned to her, his features displaying what he thought on the situation. Master Jiraiya is right. She briefly looked towards her master, who paled and still stared wide-eyed at the blood on her hand, shaking visibly. We'll only be in the way. But dash. Stop being stubborn, Sasuke said, interrupting Naruto's protest. Sasuke knew that with how easily he'd been beaten by one of the members that he would stand no chance with how sore his abdomen was at the moment. It was healed, but that didn't take away from the sore feeling of being stabbed that was left behind. Naruto gritted out a fine, his gaze was on the ridged ground beneath him, his fist clenched in ire. He looked back up just as both members began to slowly weave seals. The group of Konoha shinobi visibly stiffened while Jiraiya just stood at the ready. This wasn't a choice for you to make, Juzo told them as he and Kisame weave another seal, followed by another shortly after. Even if you run, I'll hunt you down. I will kill all of you and capture the Jinchuriki. Naruto visibly gulped, but his eyes held determination. If this guy wanted a fight, Naruto would bring it to him. A tense silence followed soon after, Jiraiya planning on how to attack his opponents to keep them away long enough for Naruto to get away. Unfortunately, that'll have to wait. A somewhat cheerful voice stated just before the swordsmen could finish their last seal. A large Venus flytrap-like extension rose from the ground, in between the two groups. The extensions parted, just enough to where a multiple-colored, green-haired individual stood in an Akatsuki cloak. Another member? Jiraiya looked at him with a critical eye, wondering how strong he was. I didn't sense his approach. Fukusaku's eyebrows furrowed involuntarily. He was using Sage Mode, how could he not be able to sense this one until he was right upon him? Something didn't sit right with him. You too, Pa? Shima questioned, keeping her eyes forward. She could feel the chakra of the two before her, and they were no joke. She knew that it would be possible to defeat them, but very hard. But now, with the new addition to the battle, it would be very likely to say that they could die, especially with how easily he snuck upon them. What's with the stiff stances? Zetsu's head tilted slightly, his tone a bit on the mocking side. I'm helping you out here. Shouldn't you be a bit more grateful? Shut up and stop messing around. The black side told him, his voice stern and full of seriousness. They started to bicker back and forth for a bit. Naruto was rather split on what was going on. Half of him was confused about how exactly someone had two different personalities within one body, and the other half was a bit weirded out by it all. No matter. The serious side sounded, ending the back and forth. Kesame, Juzo. Both of you head back. It's moving day. Saying what he came here for, Setsu slipped back underground, his chakra disappearing with him. Juzo slightly scowled, knowing the order had likely been from Pain. He hated taking orders and not finishing missions, but he grudgingly agreed, stepping back to his partner. Consider yourselves lucky. Kisame, however, chuckled a bit. What an amazing fight. His gaze briefly flicked to both Tsunade and, more importantly, Jiraiya. I can't wait for the next battle. Don't die on me now. As he said that, cool mist surrounded the duo, slowly taking over their forms. Kisame's crazed grin and Juzo's scowl were the last things the Konoha shinobi saw before the two disappeared, leaving the shinobi in a wasteland, one that smelled of blood and sweat. Jiraiya spoke after a brief moment of silence, his form releasing the tension his body once showed. Sorry to bring you guys here when I didn't need you. Soon after he relaxed, both of the great sage toads did as well. Do not worry about it, Jiraiya boy, Pa told him. Now we know of the situation. Feel free to summon anytime you feel the need. Who said you could make that decision, Pa? Shima gave a pointed look at her husband. Before Pa could respond, no doubt an argument would start, Jiraiya intervened. Sorry to interrupt, but I need you guys to check on Gamabunta. He looked at their questionable gaze before giving them a bit more detail. He took some nasty hits. He's most likely hurt and drained of chakra. The great sage toads nodded before disappearing in a puff of smoke, but not before telling Jiraiya to be careful and not to let his guard down. He spun on his heels, as his form started to go back to normal. Taking a look behind him to see Shizen trying to soothe her master while Sasuke looked deep into his thoughts and Naruto looked back at him. Jiraiya sighed deeply as looked through what was once a town. Images flashed of what it looked like compared to what it did now. There wasn't any bit of resemblance that the broken, charred remains of the town that was once so full of life. Jiraiya knew that there weren't any survivors, he felt none when he was in sage mode, and he knew that he wouldn't doubt it. Was it worth it though? All this destruction and death to bring someone home who didn't want to, and a naive 12-year-old boy. Let's head back to Konoha. They need to be informed of what happened here. Chapter 30. Kakashi sauntered through the crowded streets of Konoha, his shoulders slack with his usual relaxed posture. He had no real destination to go to, but it was better than staying in the house and doing nothing. Both Naruto and Sasuke were with Jiraiya, and he doubted Sakura would want to do the same training that he'd probably run the boys through. He shrugged inwardly. At least it gives him time to do something else. Maybe he'd go see what Rin was up to at the hospital, something he hadn't done in quite a while. After that thought came and went, his mind wandered to his other teammate, Obito. Kakashi knew, for a while, that Obito was different from how he used to act. He was a lot more serious now, and though he still acted like an idiot from time to time, it was still a lot different from how he used to act. Another thing was that Obito was strong, abnormally so. It had been a couple of times when he'd noticed that Obito was holding back during a spar, or how he held back reflexes when his opponent went on the defensive. Kakashi has never said anything though, he was much too focused on trying to get a grasp of what his eye could do during his teenage years. Kakashi spun on his heels, dodging the man he would have hit that was behind him. As he did so, someone caught his eye. Two people. It was Rin and Anko getting dango from a stand, talking in casual banter. He decided to go over to Seihi, slowly and casually making his way over to them. His mind, again, went back to Obito. He hadn't seen his teammate in some time, 3 weeks to be in fact. Kakashi noted this like the 7th time Obito went somewhere without telling him, something he usually did without Kakashi asking. But he would say always, since sometimes Obito would tell Rin instead of him if he went on a mission. But he was sure Obito wouldn't get sent on a mission, not when Kakashi knew he could be a Hokage candidate. that was something else that bothered him. Wasn't it Obito's dream to become Hokage? Why would Jiraiya be sent to find Tsunade when, in his opinion, Obito would be just fine? Did Obito decline the job, or was there something else at play? Kakashi decided he'd ask Obito himself the next time he saw him. Kakashi. A voice pulled him from his thoughts. When he took a look at where he was, he saw that he was at the stand where he had previously seen Anko and Rin. He must have walked over while his mind was drifting. Yo! Kakashi greeted casually. What are you guys up to? Nothing much, Anko answered with a small shrug before finishing her last dango with a sigh of satisfaction as the small group began to walk, just catching up. Yep. Rin gave a nod of confirmation, a smile on her face. The hospital has been a bit busy since the aftermath of the recent attack. She started and Kakashi gave a small nod, understanding that since he knew a sizable number of shinobi, as well as civilians, were injured and killed. But I'd been given a couple of days off to rest. She'd been working for weeks with barely any breaks. She hadn't had the chance to see her friends much, and this break would be her chance to catch up and enjoy herself. Not that saving people was something she didn't enjoy, quite the opposite really. Well, that was fun, Anko said aloud, stretching her arms before glancing at Rin. But I've got some duties to take care of. You two go ahead and catch up. She sent a knowing glance at Rin before winking, causing Rin to blush at the implication. Anko laughed before using the body flicker to teleport away, leaving the former members of Team Minato to themselves. They continued their walk in silence. It wasn't awkward or anything, but Rin didn't know how to start a conversation while Kakashi was much of a talker. At some point, the copy nin has pulled out his infamous book and began reading, knowing it would give Rin something to start talking about. You know I don't like it when you read that. She told him, giving him a pointed look that contrasted the red on her cheeks. Kakashi shrugged, smiling at the fact that his little plan had worked. The conversation had eased onto friendly banter and a bit of teasing at the expense of Rin. Chuckling at the expression Rin had on her face as he had attempted to read out a line from his erotic book, he closed his book and put it away, settling for putting his hands in his pockets. Have you heard anything from Obito? The question seemed to elicit a reaction from Rin, causing her expression to turn thoughtful. After a moment of thinking about the question, she turned to him. No. I was about to ask you that question. He hummed at that. Haven't you noticed? Rin asked, looking thoughtful, staring into space. Obito's different. A lot different. Kakashi knew that too. From the way he moved to the way he acted. Kakashi has caught Obito scanning his surroundings thoroughly, almost instinctively. Kakashi could understand if they were in enemy territory, considering that they were shinobi, but even when they were talking. No, that wasn't something the Obito he knew would do. He also noted Obito would hold back when they sparred. Like he would intentionally pull back his arm or legs when Kakashi had a weak side. He looked back at Rin. He decided to keep his findings to himself. She would no doubt guilt-trip him into telling her what was wrong. A small sigh escaped from his mouth as he turned back to look ahead of him. Yeah, he is. But we do have other things to worry about. Rin seemed to break out of her thinking, nodding at what he said. Yeah. Any news on Orochimaru? She turned to him with a pointed stare. I heard what happened to Sasuke. Why didn't you tell me? Kakashi knew he was in trouble. He looked behind him. Hey, look. A kid just got pushed and now he's bleeding. She turned. Huh? Seeing nothing, she turned back only to find a multitude of leaves fluttering to the ground. How do I keep falling for that? Triple X. Madara was standing over one of the many tall mountain ranges that surround the village. He looked down on the village as he did so, his mind uttering curses at just about anything he looked at. He hated these shinobi villages, their systems, their founders, and their kage. He hated what they stand for, and he always had an urge to gather all the Akatsuki members and destroy the villages one at a time. But he couldn't do that, not when he had something he needed to do, to have. He was released from his thoughts when Zetsu began to rise from the ground, stopping once he was fully out. What of their defenses? I want this quiet. Pretty lazy. The white side answered. You shouldn't have a problem getting in. You're forgetting something, you idiot. The black side said, glaring at his partner. They're planning to attack the leaf. They know they're a bit disoriented and focused on Orochimaru. They're planning to attack the leaf with Itachi Uchiha, Shisui Uchiha, Jiraiya, and Obito Uchiha still there? Doubt was laced in his voice. Even with his hatred, he knew how that wasn't a good idea. With the attack, it's more than likely that they'll be even more on edge. I don't have all the information. But do you think they might use their Jinchuriki? If they go through with this plan, then yes. Madara answered. If war comes, getting in the land of Earth and capturing the Jinchuriki will become that much harder. Zetsu's gaze shifted. Are you suggesting we stop them from going to war? Madara scoffed as he crossed his arms. No. If it comes to that, we'll offer our services to any of the villages. Then steal the Jinchuriki from right under them. I like the way you think. The black side said, chuckling a bit. Silence took over them while Madara started to think about what he should do. All he wanted was the real Madara to be revived, not all this confusing shit between countries he wanted to get rid of. Forget about getting into the land of Earth. He turned to Black Zetsu. Find the 5 tails. I need to take about some frustration. Black Zetsu slowly sunk back into the ground knowing his task. What do you need the 5 tails for? Madara didn't turn to meet the voice, though he did wonder who could have snuck up on him without him knowing. You have some balls. You could have easily killed me without me knowing. But you came out of hiding to confront me. He turned to a large man who was still being hidden partly by the shadows of Yall boulders around them. Don't disappoint me. The man stepped out of the shadows, revealing a tall man dressed up and down with red, heavy steam armor with his face mostly covered up. He also had a furnace on his back that he was holding up with no visible effort. Trust me. I won't. Triple X. Leaves fluttered back and forth on trees as the wind blowed through them. The sky was darkening, giving the sign that it was going to rain later, something that probably fit the mood of the shinobi almost at the village gates. Jiraiya sighed as he looked at Naruto, whose expression hadn't changed since they left the village. They had stayed back with Naruto's insistence on finding any survivors even though Jiraiya knew there were none. There were mangled bodies that almost made a shinobi like him want to throw up. Some were crushed and there was one that died of burns, protecting smaller corpses. Sasuke hadn't shown much emotion from it. Jiraiya knew it probably stemmed from what he had already experienced and what he still had nightmares over. Though he did have a look of disgust and one of sorry from seeing the bodies. Jiraiya turned his head again to see his old teammate and Shizune. Shizune looked sad, but that didn't compare to Tsunade's expression. It had so many different looks. Fear, sadness, anxiety, anger, shock, and disgust. Maybe even more than that. He was surprised that she was still following them. Jiraiya himself kept it out of his mind mostly. He had been through war and had seen his fair share of corpses, ranging from stabs to you seeing just about all their insides. But he didn't expect to even draw a similarity to it. It was supposed to be just getting Tsunade and getting out, but it turned into a war zone, so much so that he had to rely on Sage Mode. Something he hadn't used since the Second Shinobi World War. Just as he released himself from these thoughts, the village gates stood tall as they arrived. Wonder how I'm gonna give my report. The sage sighed as they walked up to the gate. He wasn't looking forward to this at all. Triple X. Obito was back at the Hidden Mist village. He told Isabu to tell Yagura he needed to talk with him. Maybe Yagura could know who this guy was or at least what he looked like. Obito was going to try and let the future play out, but he'd like to know who he was facing to come up with a plan. Obito activated Kamui, teleporting into the Yagura's office just as he sat down. As Obito materialized, Yagura had a blank face as he watched. When Obito was fully there, Yagura took it as a sign that the meeting had started. So, you're the one who broke me out of the genjutsu I was in. Yeah, Obito said. I did. Well, thank you. The Three Tails host said with a small chuckle. Whoever was controlling me really did a number on my reputation. Now everyone's scared of me. Speaking of that, Obito changed the subject to what he was here for. Did you see the man face who was controlling you? It would help in my investigation. See him, huh? The Kage muttered as he looked down at his desk. After a bit of thinking, the Mizuki's head started pounding furiously. He groaned as he held his head harshly. What's going on? Obito asked. Nothing. The Kage answered quickly. Nothing. It just every time I try to remember my head starts to hurt. Almost as if the memories are locked up. Obito's eyes narrowed as he stepped up to the desk, right in front of the Kage. Locked up, huh? Obito's mind went to work with theories. It must have been the Sharingan that did this. So he's no amateur with a Mangekyo Sharingan or anything. He knows what it can do and uses it to its full potential. This has to be an Uchiha. There's no way it isn't. But then the fact remains of exactly who it is. Kai. The Uchiha muttered, holding up a single hand sign. Immediately the groan stopped and the Kage looked up again. Wait, what? It stopped? The Kage questioned aloud. But it never stopped abruptly like that. It's because I stopped it. The Kage turned his attention to Obito, who had said it. Whoever controlled you wanted to make sure no one ever found out about them. But if someone defeated him, he made sure you wouldn't even remember it. The only reason you did was because Isabu told me. Yagura finished in realization. Can you remember anything? Anything at all? Not at the moment. No. The Kage answered after a brief moment to think. It doesn't hurt when I think about it, but nothing about the situation is coming back to me. Damn it. Obito cursed, looking over to his side. Nothing is ever easy for him. Isabu, the Three Tails told me that you were an Uchiha. The Kage said from out of nowhere. The Uchiha looked back at him, wondering where he was going with this. I have a question for you. How do you talk to the Three Tails? Obito cursed inwardly, though he showed no outward emotion. I should have been more specific. I forgot that he's not as outspoken as the others. Obito cleared his throat. It's not your business. It is. The Kage told him, standing up but keeping his hands on the desk as if a sign of him not attacking. I know that you saved me, I'm grateful I am. But you are a Konoha ninja. I was just being controlled by a Sharingan, something that originated in Konoha. How do I know this isn't a ploy or something? That this is something you planned? Obito gave him a blank look. Why would I waste my time with a country that is ranked the worst among the Great Five? With your reputation in Kiris, I doubt Konoha would gain much. Then why are you here? It's simple, Obito said. I'm here because the person who controlled you is running an organization that is hunting tailed beast. I want to see what is going on with that. Seriously? And how would they accomplish such a feat? Once again, it's simple, Obito said. They control them. Like you were being controlled. Obito knew that it wasn't the complete truth, but it wasn't a lie either. The Kage sighed. Fine, you've made your point. So what now? Where do we go from here? Well, first and foremost, is you need to get your country back. Try to get some stability and keep the little power you have. You've lost the 7 swordsmen and your Jinchuriki. Okay. No need to run it in. The Kage scratched the top of his head. What about you then? I need to see what's inside your head. Obito could see the younger man was about to protest, so he kept talking. But I know you don't trust me. So get your Byakugan user to make sure I don't do anything else. And whoever else you deem needs to be there. I have no interest in finding out your village's secrets. If I did, I would have done it while you were still being controlled. Yagura looked at Obito with all seriousness. Does your village know of this? No, Obito answered slowly. They don't. Fine, I'll see what I can do. The Kage opened a drawer and took out a stack of paper. He's on a mission now, but he'll be back soon. The Kage said, looking through it. I'd like it if you stayed in the village until he returns. If you stay under my watch, then I'll trust you. Sure. Obito agreed easily. He knew he was in no danger since no one alive right now could kill him, much less beat him. Yagura slipped out of his professional personality. You agreed to that rather quickly. You must be confident in your abilities. Something like that. Well, how about a little spar between me and you? The Kage suggested. I'd like to see you in action. It'll beat you sitting here with nothing to do, wouldn't it? Sure. Obito agreed, opening and closing his fist. He would show Yagura too much of his abilities and it would take his mind off the situation for a bit. Yagura smirked as he walked past his desk, heading to the door. Then, let's go. Triple X. A combination of sigh and groan could be heard from Shikaku as he rubbed his temples, just hearing the report from Jiraiya. Damn it. He cursed. Now of all times. This is so troublesome. They didn't even have a Hokage right now. Tell me about it. Jiraiya sighed tiredly. But we're in this situation and no amount of saying that will fix it. Yeah, I know. Shikaku sat up straight, taking a look behind Jiraiya at Naruto. Inoichi is on the way to take a look at the boys. From what you've described, they've likely seen more than what Genin should. Jiraiya took a look behind him. Yeah. They have. At that moment, Inoichi walked in, looking a bit surprised for being called. His eyes searched the room, getting surprised a bit more. His eyes narrowed when he looked at Naruto. Those eyes were of someone who had seen something that they likely couldn't handle. What's going on? What happened? Shikaku spoke. You're about to find out. I'll start at the top. Triple X. Two lone figures stood on one of the many mountains that surrounded IWA. They stared each other down, sizing each other up. I'll ask you again, Han said. What do you need the 5 tails for? That's none of your concern. Madara answered evenly. What you need to be worried about is how you're going to survive this encounter. You should have stayed hidden. You've heard too much, now I have to kill you. Han said nothing as he stepped out of the shadows. Madara watched, slightly surprised that who he was speaking to had been the one he was looking for. Oh, so you're Han, the Jinchuriki of the steam. Madara said. Quite the surprise. And here I was planning to capture you while your guard was down. So you're not the type to let others have a fair fight, Han stated. This world is the one that isn't fair. His voice has hatred and understanding in it. Han assumes something happened to him. But that's not what we're here to do anyway. Let's skip formalities and get right to it. I have other things to worry about, you know. Han said nothing as steam started pouring from his furnace, heating the area the two were in. Once enough of his steam surrounded the area, Han began to talk. You said that you'll steal all the Jinchuriki from under the country's noses. What do you plan to use them for? I won't ask again. Madara smirked behind his hood. You won't have to. When I capture you, you'll get the answers you seek. Instead of a retort, Madara was suddenly on the defensive as Han launched forward. Only having time to block, Madara was sent back several meters with a steam-powered punch delivered by Han. He gritted his teeth as he skidded to a halt, his forearm throbbing in pain from just that one attack. He hits hard as hell. Madara thought. Just as he thought this, Han rushed at the Akatsuki member as his chakras started to boil over. Madara quickly activated his Sharingan, already in a stance to try and deflect the move. Han's chakra boiled over just as he reached Madara. He jumped up and released a steam-powered kick. Erupting strong foot. Madara's eyes could only widen before the Jinchuriki's steam-powered foot slammed into him, breaking his guard and sending him dozens of more meters away before a large cliff broke his momentum. The impact from the sudden momentum stop carved into the large cliff, leaving a spider-like crack on the other side of it. Han calmly walked to the disaster he caused, looking at his barely moving opponent, who was now attempting to get up. "Tell me about your plans, or I will kill you." Instead of a reply, Madara laughed as he rose from the ground. "You'd kill me if I tell you. I'm no idiot." He lifted his head, his full face was now on view. He had fair skin with black, spiky hair that was in a ponytail. His eyes shifted to the Mangekyo that had 3 straight bars that connected from the enlarged pupil. Han remained unfazed, though did wonder if this man was an Uchiha. It was only a couple of members left and they all live in Konoha. Did he perhaps steal the eye from a grave? "So you have a Sharingan. Now I know how you'd be able to control the tailed beast once you capture them." His hand slipped out of his kimono. "Knowing that I cannot allow you to live. You're too dangerous. You seem to not know your place," Madara said. "You are just a pawn I'll use to get what I want. You are nothing without what's inside of you," he exclaimed before shooting a large fireball at Han. Han used his steam to help him jump over it but had no time to do anything else as wood pillars shot up at him. He landed on the first one just as the large fireball hit something, causing it to explode and smoke to rise into the air. Han leaped from the wood pillar he was on as multiple others started at him. Han started to use his steam like crazy as he evaded all the wood pillars that gave chases to him. Is this wood style? I thought only the first Hokage was capable of such a thing. Han landed on the ground and was surprised to see that the pillars weren't chasing him anymore. Madara walked from the dust cloud with a smirk before Han realized what happened. He had been led away from the village. Han cursed himself inwardly at being fooled so easily. He had to be careful fighting this man, or he'd surely lose. Madara rushed to him before Han did the same, but he also started to boil his chakra. They met and clashed in taijutsu that rocked the area. Han noticed that the man was reading him like an open book, dodging and blocking his steam-powered hits. Han stepped back as Madara rocketed forward, slamming his fist onto the side of the Jinchuriki's face. Han got sent flying several meters, finally landing along the ground with a powerful thud, with a pained sound coming from his mouth with the rough landing. Madara laughed as he clenched his fist, raising it as if inspecting it. "Oh, my bad," he said. "It seems I don't know your strength." Seeing Han's eyebrows raise in question as he got to his knees, Madara decided to elaborate. "This isn't my strength, it's yours. That's a special ability of my eyes, which allows me to see, absorb, store, and channel kinetic energy from anything that touches me." Sweat dripped down Han's covered face as he felt the dent in his armor. "If I can't hurt him by myself, then I'll use the 5 tails," he thought before he started to draw on its chakra, feeling it in his chakra coils. Red chakra started to surround his form until it covered him entirely in black and red chakra with horns sticking out. "So, you're starting to use the beast's chakra," Madara said as the wind around them picked up from the heavy chakra that Han was emitting. Suddenly, Han rushed forward causing a burst of dust in the wake. Again Madara dodged and blocked the attacks as if they were nothing. Madara blocked another blow and aimed a punch that sent the Jinchuriki flying through the air. As he sailed, multiple large chakra hands launched from different parts of the Jinchuriki's body, speeding toward the Akatsuki member. Madara activated his left eye and dodged every hand, moving further away from the Jinchuriki in the process. When the barrage stopped, Madara locked his eyes on the Jinchuriki who had an almost complete tailed beast bomb. He then consumed it before sinking a bit into the ground from just how heavy it was. Suddenly the beast released the attack, which came out in a large beam that destroyed everything in its wake. Madara's eyes widened before he activated them both just as the blast reached him, causing a large explosion that rocked the area, sending down large boulders and cliffs making debris fly everywhere. "I hope that's the end," Han thought as his form started to flicker a bit. I can't keep this form for long, not if I have control over it anyway. That was when he noticed something yellow and large in the smoke, and when it was removed he got a full look at a dark green, a see-through skeleton with 3 horns coming out of its head. In the center of it was Madara. Han watched in disbelief as Madara started to dust himself off, chuckling a bit. Was that honestly your best? That is quite pitiful. Though I do give you props. You certainly live up to your reputation. Unfortunately, his eyes flashed red dangerously. I was your opponent. So you had no chance of winning in the first place. Madara hands performed into the ram seal. This is just about all the kinetic energy I've collected over the past month. Saying that, he released the energy into his Susanoo, watching as the Susanoo's hands created a large fireball in between them. He then raised one hand to the Jinchuriki. Disappear. At that moment, the fireball connected with Han faster than he could react to, shaking the area, causing everything in the vicinity to be destroyed. When the shaking stopped and the smoke cleared, Han was lying on the ground face first, unmoving. At that moment, Zetsu appeared from the ground. I see that those Hashirama cells are helping you. At that, Madara gave a scoff as his facial features tightened. Don't speak his name. I already hate myself for using him to help me get stronger. But if it'll bring the real Madara back, then I'll do anything. Of course. Zetsu answered as he walked up to the slightly charred body of Han, who was bleeding heavily. Zetsu touched his bloodied back, healing in just a little with his cells. He's almost dead. That would have stopped the plan indefinitely. Sorry, I got carried away with this new ability of my right eye. But enough of that. Zetsu takes him back to the base and tell all the other members to go back too. I have some business with the Tsuchikage. Black Zetsu smirked as he did as told, grabbing the Jinchuriki and sinking into the ground. Chapter 31. That's a lot to take in. Inoichi finally said after hearing from Shikaku. A bustling city reduced to rubble and ash when it wasn't even the time of war wasn't good at all. He hated when innocent civilians got involved in something they have nothing to do with. It was something that happened way too much for his liking. Yeah, I know. Shikaku said. Regardless, I need you to take care of Naruto and Sasuke. Bring Kakashi with you if necessary and tell one of the messengers to bring Obito Uchiha here. Got it. He replied with a nod, then turned to the 2 youths. Both of you, can you come with me? They nodded and left shortly afterward. Moments later, Tsunade had gotten up off the floor. If that is all, we'll be leaving. She said, heading for the door.
Tsunade stopp riktigt här. Shikaku saitas he kave her astern lokka.
She turned to face him, glaring at him. Why should I? I'm not one of your shinobi you can order around. Calm down, Tsunade. Jiraiya yelled at her. You're here because we need a Hokage. That was the reason all those people died. Don't put that on me, she hissed. I didn't ask you to come to me and bring me into this in the first place. You have plenty of shinobi that could take the lead, but you come for someone who doesn't want to be a shinobi anymore. Then your fight brings down a town and kills everyone in it, and you want to say I'm the reason. Are you all of your minds? Tsunade-sama. Calm down. Shizune yelled. Tsunade turned to her with a harsh glare, not backing down. No, she yelled before breathing in harshly. Forget this, I'm going for a drink. Don't follow me. With that, she left the room, slamming the door behind her. None of them seemed to notice a shadowy figure leave shortly after. Triple X. Obito was just getting into his fighting stance when Isabu started to talk, along with the other tailed beast. Obito-san. Kokuo has been captured. Both Obito and Yagura were surprised at the information. Is he still there with you? Can he speak? Obito asked. Yes. But you'll have to completely come into the mindscape. He's weak right now because of his Jinchuriki's condition. Matatabi answered. Obito nodded and turned to Yagura. Guess we'll have to take a rain check on our spar. His voice was of seriousness and urgency. Yagura nodded, knowing why he was leaving. Yeah. I wish you could come with, but I've got things to handle here. Though I will be inclined to get that spar when you come back. I won't forget. Obito nodded. Of course. I'll be back in a bit. With that, the Uchiha activated his Sharingan, feeling the usual pull of his body and chakra before completely disappearing. Yagura wondered how did he do that. It looked cool. Obito opened his eyes to a wide open space, surrounded by the nine-tailed beast. Though, Kokuo looked noticeably weaker. Obito regarded him silently before speaking. Where are you now? He asked. I don't know. But we're somewhere moist, full of water. That is all I can tell from my senses. Kokuo answered with a strained voice. Why didn't you say anything while the fight was happening? I could have intervened. Something cut off my communication. Almost like they knew something about what we are doing. Obito listened to what he said closely, filing that away in his head. Obito decided to tell him the truth. You might be lost. I have no idea who it is that captured you and I don't know where the Akatsuki base is. Obito told him truthfully. You know this is your fault, brat. Kurama said as he eyed him. Obito turned to regard him as the fox continued. I told you that following the timeline will only make things worse. And I asked you did you have a better plan? And you told me that I was on my own. That meant that you agreed to it. Don't put this only on me, it's all of our fault. Obito-san is right? Matatabi told Kurama as she looked over to him. But Kurama is as well. The tailed beast looked back at Obito. We tailed beast can only do so much while we are in our Jinchuriki. The most we can hope for is to bond with our Jinchuriki more to better combine our efforts. You, on the other hand, are on the outside and whatever you choose directly affects everything that is on this earth. Kurama grumbled a bit, looking away while Obito took in what the two tails said. After a bit, he nodded. You're right. And regardless there is no point in arguing. Saying that Obito turned to Kokuo. I'll try my hardest to find you. Do you at least know who exactly is carrying you? Yes. I was briefly able to catch their face before Han lost consciousness. It's someone with a half white and black face. Kokuo answered. Obito's eyes widened briefly as he received the information. Okay. So he's still in control of the Akatsuki, good. I've been looking for him. It's time to kill him. Even if everything else happens, letting Kagaya come back is something I cannot allow under any circumstances. Isn't that Black Zetsu? Kurama asked. I thought he traveled through the ground. He probably can't with another person either him. Vuki theorized. I'll be back. Was all Obito said before using Kamui to teleport back to a forest. He appeared on a tree as the spiral around his right eye dissipated. Obito bit his thumb, drawing a small amount of blood before preforming the hand signs required for the summoning jutsu. Multiple puffs of smoke dispersed, revealing 10 different-sized owls. The largest one spoke to Obito. This must be important if you summon all of us elites. We will not fail you. Obito nodded as he regarded all of them. I need the location of Han of the Five Tails. He looks like this. He gestured over to the shadow clone he made that transformed into Han. Once the owls got a good look, the clone vanished in a puff of smoke. Check the southeastern parts of the land of Earth. And anywhere nearby with somewhere that is damp. Go now. Yes. They all answered in unison and with a flap of their wings, they were all gone. Obito looked at their retreating forms as the sun lowered from the sky up top. In the blink of an eye, Obito was gone within a spiral. Triple X. Orochimaru hideout. Orochimaru was in a foul mood. Every time he looked upon his dangling, useless arms he cursed his sensei. He couldn't continue his experiments or proceed with what he had planned. I need a new body. He gritted out. Seconds later he heard multiple footsteps approaching him. He calmed himself just before a knock was heard at his door and the footsteps ceased. Come in. A group of 5 people did so. The Sound 4 and Kabuto. They all bowed down to Orochimaru as he stood up. Remember, I need Sasuke Uchiha and Rin Noara at my feet. Be discreet as possible. The village is on high alert and I need you all now. Yes, Lord Orochimaru. They all said in unison before going to carry on their mission. Triple X. Danzo's secret hideout number 3. Danzo walked through a dimly lit corridor, making his way to a large and open area within his hideout. Once he arrived, he saw that all of the soldiers were bowed down and awaiting his command. He tapped his cane once on the ground as the signal for no one to speak until he was finished. I have a mission for you all. It is for the benefit of the Konoha, and that means that no failure will be accepted. Unfortunately, I am still not the Hokage. Those fools think a drunk like Tsunade is more suited than I. They don't see that if I don't become Hokage, then the village will collapse and everything that was built will be in shambles, hardly recognizable. With this mission, you will assassinate Kakashi Hatake and bring his left eye to me. Then, you'll frame the drunk Tsunade for it. No go. Yes, Lord Danzo. The group of 15 said before disappearing. Triple X. Hidden Stone Village. Obito looked around the rocky area, looking for signs of a fight. Soon enough he found signs of a tough fight that spread for miles. How did no one notice this? Iwa's security is lacking. As soon as he said that, a whizzing noise sounded through the air. Obito whipped out a kunai and turned to deflect a rapidly spinning projectile. It spun on his kunai, carving into it before he used his strength to push it back. He then deflected a barrage of kunai as his attacker blitzed him from behind. Obito activated Kamui, allowing the last kunai to pass through his body and hit his attacker in the throat, killing him instantly. Obito turned to find a IWA shinobi on the ground, dead. Damn it. If I would have known, I would have just knocked him out. Well, no point in crying over spilled milk. He walked past the body and took a look at his surroundings. Obvious signs of a fight were very much present, but nothing other than that. Obito silently walked over to a large boulder on the border of the hidden stone. He pressed his hand to it, leaving a small seal that seemed to seep into the earth. If anyone with a noticeable chakra level runs through here, I'll know. I've placed a few in the hidden mist already. Maybe I should do that for the rest as well while my owls are still looking around. With that, the Uchiha disappeared again using Kamui. Triple X. Hidden Leaf Village. I'm telling you. I don't need any of this therapy. Naruto told Inoichi the 100th time. I'll be Hokage. The loud blonde seemed to have reverted back to the way he was. Though any veteran could see that the events were still on his mind. We'll see about that. See about what? A feminine voice asked, which turned out to be Ino. Inoichi totally forgot that he brought his daughter to where he used to work at. Sasuke. Is that you? She yelled upon seeing him, completely forgetting about her father and where she was. Sasuke annoyingly sighed. Not this again. Just before anything else was said, however, Kakashi and Sakura had arrived, hearing the news that the rest of the team was back. How'd you know we were here? Inoichi asked Kakashi as the genin began to converse. Shikaku. The copy ninja answered simply, in his usual bland and almost bored voice. He then turned to his 2 best students. I heard a bit from him in the note about those 2. Anything you noticed? The retired shinobi sighed. Nothing too serious. But that's just from observation alone. You plan on probing through their minds? The blonde shook his head. No, their case isn't that serious. But they'll probably have time off duty to be observed. But I think they'll be fine. They watched as the genin talked and well, the Uchiha was just staring, but that was better than him looking away altogether. Do you know where your teammate is? Shikaku needs him. If you mean Obito, then no. I haven't seen him in a while, nor has anyone else. I even asked his wife and she hadn't seen him since we haven't. The only person I didn't ask was Shisui and Itachi, but they're out on several missions right now. The ninja answered after a bit of thinking. What about the other Uchiha? What was her name again? You mean Izumi? Kakashi asked, getting a nod in return. I don't know about her either. But Rin, Kurenai, or Anko might know. When they got finished talking, they could see that the genin had snuck off. Those kids. They snuck off while we were talking. Inoichi yelled comically as he looked at their previous spot. Well, this is your responsibility, so I'll leave you to it. The copy ninja smoothly said as began to make his exit. Where do you think you're going? These are your students and your Goidashi couldn't even finish as the copy ninja had already left with the body flicker. Kakashi chuckled a bit as he appeared on a roof. Now he knew why Obito liked messing with people. It was a lot of fun. Kakashi was about to jump to the next roof when his senses were telling him that multiple people were behind him. He turned to see multiple cloaked figures with blank mask. I wonder who these guys are. He mused internally. It seemed that Konoha was a target these days. Triple X. In the land of hot water. Shisui whistled a slow tune as he made his way through a thick forest, hopping from branch to branch. He stopped on a tree at the edge of a clearing. After searching around for a bit, the Uchiha decided that it was clear and leaped into the clearing, landing on his feet. As soon as he landed, he couldn't help but feel that something was off. He was tempted to shrug it off, but Obito had told him to never do that and always be aware of his surroundings. Going through what had just happened, the Uchiha realized that he felt weird as soon as he landed. He looked beneath him as his eyes narrowed in suspicion. He laid on the ground with his ear pressed to it, then he knocked on the ground. To his surprise, the ground felt, for lack of a better word, hollow. Like there was no more earth underneath. The Uchiha quickly unsheathed his Anto, and with trainee strength and speed stabbed the ground, breaking through the rock. He wiggled his sword around only for the end to move and not be stuck like it should have been. His mind raced with questions as he pulled his Anto out of the ground, sheathing it. Something is under here. Obviously something important, but what is that exactly? Is it something from Orochimaru? I thought he had his own ninja village. A frown surfaced on his face as he remembered what happened when Orochimaru showed up to Konoha. Forget it. No point in speculating when I can just go in. Saying that, the Uchiha bent down on one knee and laid his hand on the ground. Chakra rushed to his hand as he started to change its property to lightning. Electric surge. Lightning suddenly sparked the ground and spread out. He kept up the voltage before the ground suddenly shook and collapsed under him. Shisui teleported above the falling debris so he wouldn't get crushed. The debris fell, causing a lot of noise in the area. He landed with a thud as the noise calmed down. Now only small pebbles were falling. As the dust cleared, Shisui was greeted by a dark passageway. Guess I'm going in there. With that, the Uchiha made his way through the dark. Of course, he activated his Sharingan and kept his senses to 100%. He didn't want to get blindsided since any attack could kill him if he wasn't careful. He walked quietly and calmly through the dark underground, using his senses to get around. He felt as if he walked for about 20 minutes before he saw light at the end of the hallway. He sped up slightly, and before he knew it, he was at the entrance. He didn't go straight in, however, and stuck to looking from the shadows, and what he saw surprised him. It looked like a full army of white people with green hair, all turned away from him on one side. On the other side, it was an army as well, though this was comprised of smaller white-skinned people with white hair, also turned away from him. What the hell? What is this? He asked himself in a whisper, a surprised look etchy on his face. Shisui took a step out of the shadows. Our plans are coming together. Shui quickly took a step back into the shadows as he heard that voice. His enhanced eyes searched every part of the room, finally finding the voice going up some stone stairs that Shui noticed before. That isn't Orochimaru. Who the hell is that? What the hell is that? He asked himself as he took in the man's features. From what he could see, the man was completely white and covered in a black cloak with red clouds on it. Akatsuki. Shui noted, remembering the description Asuma and Kurenai provided. The man went out of view as Shui, once again, turned his attention to the motionless army ahead of him. Shui debated with himself on should he stay or not. He had enough information already, but he knew that the problem wouldn't be dealt with until they had a Hokage and the manpower to combat an Akatsuki base. S-rank ninja who are capable of capturing tailed beast. He decided to go in, but before he did, he pulled out a kunai and let his chakra run through it. Then he stuck in the wall. This was so he could know where he came from if anything got hectic. He didn't expect this to be clean. He snuck in as an eerie feeling crawled over him. The two giant groups didn't move as he silently and slowly made his way in. It was perfect because of the dim lighting from lights overhead. He went through an open door frame to his left but was stopped by another closed and locked door. The Uchiha took off his backpack, quietly going through his supplies that he brought along on his mission. He pulled out a kind of sealing tag before closing his backpack and putting it back on his back. He then stuck it to the door before using the ram seal. An invisible barrier surrounded the area, with anything in it capable of being sensed by the Uchiha. No one is in there. Good. The Uchiha took the sealing tag off the door. He then took another sealing tag out of his ninja pouch and slipped underneath the door. He used the sealing tag to get a location to lock onto, then he used the body flicker to bypass the door, getting inside. The first thing he saw were multiple coffins that had labels on them. They read first Tsuchikage, second Reikage, first Mizukage, second Kazekage. Shusui's face took in a surprised look as he read the titles. This can't be real. He jogged up to the first coffin that read third Kazekage. When he opened it, he was shocked to find a reanimated version of that Kage inside. Are the Akatsuki using these dead Kage to help capture Jinchuriki? Shui asked himself as he thought back to the Akatsuki's goal. This was getting more and more dangerous each second he was here. Meters away were multiple Kage and an army with an Akatsuki member here. Probably more. Shui closed the coffin back up, moving to another open room. This room was labeled Uzumaki clan. No way. Shui gritted as he walked into the room. There were many coffins in this room with a bunch of clan members' names on the front of the coffins. They could easily bring down a nation with this much firepower. Shui was serious with his claim since the Uzumaki clan was much more dangerous than the Uchiha, which were why they were wiped out. He was here. Meters away were multiple Kage and an army with an Akatsuki member here. Probably more. What else would they have here? He said quietly as he peeked down the hall from the room door. Sensing no one, the Uchiha quietly made his way down another dimly lit hallway, looking out for traps or seals. His thoughts went back to the Uzumaki room. From what he could see, they didn't have Kushina Uzumaki, someone he was familiar with since he was around his sensei a lot. But they did have someone alarming to him. Mito Uzumaki. He knew that was the first Hokage's wife, someone who had apparently sealed the nine tails within herself as her husband battled Madara Uchiha. Most of her abilities were unknown, but she was feared around the nations. That made Shui want to leave immediately and make his way back to Konoha as fast as possible. But he knew that the longer he stayed the more he found out, and the more danger he was in. I'll be fine. He reasoned. If anything gets out of hand, I'll teleport to the exit. He finally came upon another door, which was the dead end of the hallway. The door was closed, so he did what he did to the last closed door. No one was inside, so he slipped a tag under the door and teleported inside. He immediately covered his nose as a foul stench surrounded the area. What died in here? He grimaced in disgust as his eyes searched the room. Work tables with blood and dead bodies hung up on walls filled his view. He almost threw up as he saw the body on the table. It was bisected with rotting organs on full display with bones probing through its skin. The corpse eyes were wide open, showing that however he was killed it had been by surprise. Shui held his hands together, silently paying his respects. Once he was done, he immediately went to work with inspecting the body. He held up the eyelids of the victim, checking the eyes thoroughly. He saw nothing in it other than shock. It was no fear, so he knew this man had died before he even knew what happened. He moved on, checking the throat to see if it had anything wrong. He didn't find a slashed throat, so the man didn't die the most common surprised method. He opened the mouth of the victim to see multiple rotten teeth, but most were gone. He's been dead for a couple of weeks. Shui concluded internally. There's no sign of bloating and the skin is red from the blood decaying. The body also isn't liquefied, so it hasn't been a month. This doesn't give me any insight as to how long this base has been here. Though my guess is that this man stumbled upon it the same way I did, and paid the price. He stepped away from the body, dusting his hands off in the process. I hate this part of my job. He muttered as he gave one more glance at the corpse before moving on. He looked around the room, seeing chemicals and vials along a shelf. He looked at the labels of each container. Nothing but chemicals, he noted before moving on. He searched through drawers and file cabinets, grabbing anything that looked remotely important and putting it in his backpack. Things like plans or recipes to make a certain chemical. There were even some things he hadn't heard of. I should leave. I'm having a bad feeling for some reason. Just as he said that, he heard a sizzling noise from all around him. He hastily looked around him to see dozens of explosive tags all around the walls and roof, about to detonate. He quickly tried to teleport to where his kunai was, but noticed quickly that he couldn't sense it. The tags detonated, causing a large explosion and burying the room in rock. Shui looked at the rock-filled doorway. He barely made it out of there, and if he'd been a second of, he would have gotten flattened. I'm lucky I'm so good with the body flicker. Just as he said this, more sizzle sounds filled his ears and he looked around the hallway, seeing explosive tags everywhere. He ran as fast as he could as the tags exploded behind him, gaining on him. Soon he could feel the rumble of each explosion and couch as the hallway filled with smoke. The last explosion went off just as Shui leaped from the hallway. Just as he did, he was sent sprawling with a kick as his vision was still coming back from the heat and smoke. He picked himself up quickly and opened his eyes to a large shuriken coming at him. It impales him before he could react, and his attacker smirked in triumph before scowling as the body turned out to be a wooden log. Stupid substitution. I wish I could fight the man who created such a move. Annoyed, Shui's attacker turned to face him as he was now standing behind him. Shui was shocked to see that the man had the Sharingan and everywhere. Except for one missing arm. Shui noted. Where did you get those Sharingan? Who the hell are you? Shui demanded as his attacker gave him a blank stare. My name is Shin Uchiha. The man curtly responded, deliberately ignoring the first question on purpose. What are you doing in my base? I didn't think I had any guest. Shui's face grew firm and he gripped the handle of his Zanto behind his back. Answer my question now or I'll force it out of you. I got these from some donors. That's a lie. Shui yelled. Itachi, him, and their sensei has collected all the Sharingan of the people they killed on the Uchiha massacre mission. They counted the eyes for every Uchiha and Obito stored them within his dimension. There was no way he got the out of there. Shin chuckled as he looked upon the angered Uchiha. I didn't say they were voluntary donors. At that he laughed hysterically before quieting back down, deciding to elaborate a bit. These are all from corpses. I went on a collecting spree, though imagine my surprise to see most of the eyes missing from almost all the corpses. We missed some. We should have checked again. Shui said inwardly, cursing the situation. And here I was expecting some type of emotion from you usually stoic Uchiha. But I guess that's what makes you guys so interesting to me. What are your plans? Shui demanded. I wouldn't be fun if I told you. The man told him blandly. Shisui had enough and rushed the Akatsuki member. If the man didn't give him the answers, then Shisui would take it. The man smirked as he activated his Mangekyo, sending several weapons all marked with a seal. Shisui noticed and teleported away just as the weapons cut into the ground. He reappeared in the air weaving hand signs. Fire style, fireball jutsu. A ball of condensed flame shot from Shisui, heading to Shin. He quickly jumped away as the flames slammed into the ground, causing tremors and shaking the underground base. No more ninjutsu. Shisui decided. I might bury myself alive if I'm not careful. Shin suddenly ripped through the smoke the fireball caused as the true Uchiha got into a battle stance. He had to block as Shin reared his fist back and slammed the Uchiha into the wall. As the Uchiha's back bounced off the wall, Shin sent a couple of powerful punches. Shisui inclines his head twice, dodging punches that would have probably shattered his jaw seeing as the rock behind him crumbled. Shisui leaped forward, throwing an uppercut. Shin dodged as Shisui twisted his body midair, kicking his opponent in the chest hard enough for him to get some distance. Shisui landed on his feet before darting at his opponent. Shin could only see a blur of black before he heaved as a foot slammed into his abdomen, forcefully taking the air from his lungs. The kick sent him sprawling to the ground, his skin scraping against the earth underneath him as skidded to a halt on his side. Just as Shisui was about to rush again, a multitude of footsteps coming at him caused him to turn around. About 10 of the smaller side of the army converged on his position all at once. Shisui blocked a punch with his forearm and looked one of the clones in the eye, ready to put him to sleep. That's when he saw 2 pairs of Sharingan almost glaring back at him. What was all the shocked Uchiha could get out before he was sent flying by Shin. He managed to get up on one knee as he looked to see 10 clones rushing him. Shisui reaches into his ninja pouch as he sped of in a blur. He pushed a surprised clone that was in the front into the middle of the group before disappearing. That's when all the clones noticed an explosive tag on the clone before he exploded, catching all of them inside. The Anto Iron Shu, the base and large rocks started to fall down. Now look at what you've done. Shin yelled as boulders slammed into some of the unmoving clones. He called a barrage of scalpels and directed them at the Uchiha. Shisui launched a series of shuriken, deflecting the attack with multiple clangs. As he moved in, he activated his Sharingan as he unsheathed his Anto, gripping it in reverse. Shin leaped back in response, grabbing and chucking a large boulder at Shisui. Shisui summoned his chakra to his blade before changing its property as the boulder sailed towards him. Suddenly his Tanto ignited with chakra-laced fire. Uchiha style, fire slash. Shisui gathered his strength before releasing it in a sideways slash that cut through the boulder with insane speed. Shisui speed past the now broken rock as they slammed into the ground behind him. Shin gritted his teeth as Shisui had finally caught up to him, aiming to cut him down. As Shisui prepared a slash, Shin was already in position to dodge and counterattack, given that he had Sharingan all around his body. But the Uchiha seemed to disappear in front of him, and only when he tasted blood coming from his mouth. How? He stuttered as he peeked behind him to see Shisui with his Tanto sticking in his back. Even with all these Sharingans, you can't dodge everything. You're seeing multiple afterimages of me. That's who you've been fighting. Shisui informed him. Though not at first. But you would have never noticed since your senses are everywhere. Shisui eyes spinner lazily, slowly forming his Mangekyo Sharingan. I'm through asking for information I can just take. I've heard of your legendary eyes. Shin choked out. The Kodo Amatsukami, the legendary genjutsu, that of which no one can escape. Just as Shisui was about to go through with his threat, a sudden explosion rocked the base, sending the roof collapsing. Shisui kept his hold on Shin as he teleported to the outside, avoiding instant death. Shisui appeared on a large tree, holding Shin in his grasp as he watched the clearing cave in on itself. He thought that Shin might have set up traps, but outed that as he heard a voice after the disaster died down. Now that's some artsasori, my man. Who is that? Shisui whispered to himself, seeing 2 shadows come from the dust. Taking the opportunity to escape, Shin lifted himself, kicking back the Uchiha in the process before jumping over to another tree. Damn it! I got distracted. He cursed as blood dripped from his tanto. Both figures came in full view. One was a young man with blonde hair tied in a ponytail with the Akatsuki cloak on. His partner was hunched back with a black mask covering the lower parts of his face. Oi! Where were you two? Shin yelled as he glared at them from the tree. Oh, calm down. Deidara told him before pointing over to his partner. Sasori here just needed to take a piss. Sasori immediately turned to him with a glare. That's a lie. We both know that you wanted to stop for some dango at that village. Before Deidara could reply back, Shin interrupted him by landing in front of the two. You both are idiots. Now pay attention and help me fight. Deidara shrugged as the three turned to the lone Konoha shinobi. Shisui brought chakra to the middle of his hand where a small seal was shown to be. Chakra swirled around it until it filled up just as he readied himself for battle. Triple X. Land of Rice. Itachi's hand burned slightly as he hopped from tree to tree on his way back to the Konoha. He stopped in his tracks before taking a look at his hand, seeing a seal that him and Shisui had placed on each other in case of if the other was in trouble. I'm coming, Shisui. Chapter 32. So, these are the guys that are going around collecting Jinchuriki, huh? Bakoto Amatsukami user notes internally as he studied the appearances of his adversaries. In all honesty, he was thinking of more big and intimidating people, but he wasn't going to go easy just because they weren't what he imagined them to be. Every ninja knew not to judge someone's skill by their appearance, though some did it because of arrogance. That aside, he wondered if any of them was the leader. If he went by sight alone, he'd say that it was the guy with multiple Sharingan, but with how the other two disregarded his safety and weren't scared of him, it was safe to say that it wasn't the case at all. But that left the question as to who is the boss. He'd probably get that answered until he won if he won, and even then they might get away, or even more, members could come for backup. Speaking of backup, he had called Itachi and is sure that he is on his way. But that didn't mean he would get here in time. They need to get the reverse summoning down so that they could summon each other for situations such as these. So, you ready to die, Uchiha? Shin taunted, his voice cold and his eyes showing that he could and would go through with his threat. Those facts caused the atmosphere to drop into a tense, crisp silence until... Ha! An explosion erupted under Shisui, surprising him since he didn't sense any chakra coming toward him. However, he was able to escape the explosion with the body flicker, though his left foot still got caught in the explosion, injuring him a little bit. Shisui grunted as he landed on another large branch, his left leg had almost given out from the sudden drop. Realizing that it was the blonde-haired member that caused the explosion in the hideout, he stretched his senses as far as he could without losing how much he could sense. It wasn't like the Byakugan that had 360 degrees of near-perfect vision, but it would be enough for him to see these explosions coming and act accordingly. A blur from the corner of his eyes catches his attention. Realizing that whatever was coming at him was sharp, he unsheathes his tanto, using the blade as a sort of shield, blocking to what now seemed like the tail of a scorpion. Dangerous eyes stared back at him before he heard the man's rasp and deep voice. You're Shisui the teleporter, are you not? Yeah. The Uchiha answered as he groaned, trying to keep back the scorpion tail whilst thinking about how he was going to deal with the other two. Before Sasori has a chance to speak again, their conversation, if you'd call it that, was interrupted when Shisui noticed Shin rushing him from above. He used the body flicker once more, appearing above the large branch, sticking to the side of the tree just as Shin's fist smashed into the tree, sending both members crashing down. Idiot, Shisui mutters as he leaps to another tree. I don't know much about their skills yet, only that the one with the Sharingans is strong physically and has a Mangekyo that he knows how to use. One uses highly dangerous explosives, considering that the attack still caught me in the foot despite the fact I was teleporting. But he wasn't worried as he could increase the speed using chakra, but that would take away the whole stealth part of the jutsu, though he didn't need stealth in a full-on battle. Know that those guys are out of the way, you can finally witness my art in its true form, Dozens of clay-made insects were launched at the Uchiha just as he jumped off a tree. Ha! At the call, they all exploded at once, surprising Shisui and rocking the area, blowing dozens of trees away. Smirking, the S-rank ninja looked down at his explosive work in satisfaction. True art always prevails, Suddenly Shisui, in a blur, appeared behind him, a kunai held up in a reverse grip that gave the impression that the wielder was aiming to slice his throat when his opponent would inevitably turn around. His opponent did just that, surprised that he had been snuck up on without him noticing before he was upon him, and it was by someone he presumed dead. Knowing he couldn't fully get out of the way in time, Deidara moves his body quickly so that the kunai could stab him in the shoulder instead of the throat. Deidara grabs Shisui's forearm, which now has blood on it from Deidara, then uses his free hand to aim a punch at Shisui. Shisui easily catches the punch with his free hand, however, their little skirmish for control is broken up with a scorpion tail, separating the two. Suddenly, Shisui felt like his head had been smashed in, sending him plummeting to the ground with his body being bounced between branches as he fell. I didn't need your help. The blonde turned to glare at his two partners. No one was helping you, Shin told him in his cold, emotionless voice. We just happened to have the same enemy, and besides, if you die, the leader would give me shit. The blonde kept up his glare a little bit more before turning around in a mutter. Holding up a hand sign, he regarded his partners. Unless you want to be turned into a pile of ash, I'd stay away from our friend here. I've managed to plant small bombs on his arm when I grabbed a hold of it. In the meanwhile of that conversation, Shisui was struggling to get to his feet. That strike to the head had rattled his senses, preventing him from standing straight, given his wobbly posture. And seeing double didn't help in the slightest. Other than his head, his body had multiple cuts on it from his fall between the sharp branches, but they were minor flesh wounds and could be easily healed. Ha! Shisui's eyes widened, hearing that sound had always ended in an explosion. But he couldn't do anything as the explosion was right on his arm, swallowing him in it and hitting him dead on. The explosion, once again, destroyed the surrounding area. Even trees miles away felt the impact shown by how the leaves fluttered on the tree, hanging onto it by a mere stem. Soon the smoke had cleared, showing a heavily panting Shisui with a bloodied left arm and even more injuries around his body, though they weren't as serious as the one on his arm. That had also meant that his already injured foot was even more so, which in the situation he was in, wasn't good. Even through all of that, the Uchiha didn't waver one bit, racking his brain for some sort of strategy from what he had seen from each opponent while he was struggling to get to his feet. The one with the explosion is a long-to-short range fighter. He told himself, seeing as to how that when he got close, the blonde had managed to attach small bombs to his skin without him noticing. Even if I manage to get close, I can't let him touch me. By himself, he wouldn't be much of a challenge in taijutsu, but with his partners helping him then there's no way I can get close. I'll be stuck running away from his bombs unless Dash's eyes widened in realization. If he used his Susanoo, then he could attack while having a defense at once. He had only activated his Susanoo a handful amount of times since using Kodo Amatsukami really negated the use of his Susanoo, or he W's usually stronger than most of his opponents anyway. But he knew that he couldn't beat them by himself, nor use Kodo Amatsukami since he had to be completely still while using it, and it took a large amount of chakra that would only make it so that he could only use it 4 times a day. Though it still would leave him temporarily with worsened eyesight after each use, with it also only being able to use it on one person at a time. Though with that, as of now, he had only 2 uses of Kodo Amatsukami since he just used a bunch of chakra to help cover his arm. It didn't shield his arm completely from damage, but it did do its job, which was to prevent him from getting his arm blown into bits. Now he was on one knee, his head lowered to the ground as his panting slowly stopped. Well, here goes nothing. I just hope that I have enough chakra to beat them before my body wears out. Green chakra suddenly sprung from the Uchiha, forming slowly into what looked like a humanoid. A rib cage had formed first, slowly expanding before a head appeared next with arms slowly forming. Clothing and armor soon covered the humanoid, butting up its chest with it now having a red tomo in its center. What the hell, Dash? Is that? Shin finished the sentence that Deidara had started as they looked upon the finished Susanoo with awe, surprise, and a bit of fear. Sasori looked on in surprise as well, but, more than surprised, he was excited. He was gonna add this man into his puppet collection. Triple X. Konoha. Things in the Leaf Village had calmed down somewhat as night had rolled around. Naruto and Sasuke had met up with Sakura some time ago, getting into their normal easy banter, avoiding telling Sakura what they had seen while they were gone. She inevitably asked, and it had been Naruto that tried to convince her that nothing out of the ordinary had happened. As soon as he said that, she immediately knew that he was somehow lying and turned to Sasuke for an answer, who only gave her a shrug that made her even more suspicious. She had put more pressure on Naruto, using the fact that he had a crush on her, who knows how he does, to her advantage. The strategy was admittedly smart, in the fact that Naruto had almost broke and would have if Sasuke had not diverted her attention to what they were about to do as a team. Go out for a bite to eat. Sakura has first confused this as a date between the two of them, but Sasuke quickly clarified that he meant it for the three of them. Naruto had wanted ramen, but Sasuke said that it was his idea and he would choose what they would eat, though he wouldn't pay for any of them. Once it had gotten night, they had met up, walking through the village in a comfortable silence until Naruto had broken it, giving his teammate a questionable look as his arms were folded behind his head. Where are going to eat at, Sasuke? If you don't know, then let's just get some ramen. I am quite curious myself. The female of the team added. Sasuke said nothing, keeping his hands in his pants pockets and his eyes forward. They were almost there and he needed to come up with something so that the owner could let him and his friends in. He was inviting them to a bar, but it wasn't for them to drink or anything. He just really liked the chicken teriyaki for when Shisui had brought him some home after he went out with Itachi and Izumi. He knew that Izumi knew the owner well, as they had gone to the academy together, but she quit when her father died, causing her to have to take over the family business. Sasuke, isn't this where grown-ups eat? Sakura asked, kicking the Uchiha out of his thoughts to where he saw that his body had taken them to the bar while his mind was elsewhere. Follow me, and keep quiet, Naruto. Naruto gave a small pout at the jab the Uchiha had thrown, sending him a small glare. I'm a ninja, if you didn't know. I can be quiet when I need to. Sasuke just gave the usual grunt and started walking inside, his two teammates following behind closely. As soon as they walked inside, the smell of sake and food smacked them in the face, which caused Sakura to cover her nose and Naruto to grimace while Sasuke just kept a straight face, walking as if nothing was wrong in the first place. He walks to the first door inside of the place, which is labeled employees only. As soon as they walked in, they were immediately spotted by one of the employees, which was exactly what the Uchiha wanted. Hey! What are you kids doing back here? We came here to see the owner. You can't just dash, but his words die off as he looked at the Uchiha clan symbol that Sasuke shows him. Go down the hallway, third door to the left. Sasuke grunts as he follows the instruction, walking past the employee with his two teammates in tow. Hey, Sasuke. What the heck was that? Naruto whisper yells for some reason. Sakura looks as if she agrees with Naruto's question, so he obliges. It's nothing too serious. The owner is just close with us, probably because she feels sympathy for our situation, but regardless of the fact, she treats us as if we're VIP. My family doesn't use it often, but I do. Just as he finished, they arrive at the door simply labeled office. Before they go in, Sasuke tells them to stay out here and wait on him before rudely walking in himself, not worrying himself to knock. That was the first thing that the owner had called him on. I see you don't like knocking still. The woman said. She was a bit pale with ash blonde hair that was rolled into a single bun, but it wasn't tight considering the bangs she had flowing down. So she remembers me. Sasuke thought, remembering when they first met. She was visiting Izumi over at their large estate when he just walked in unannounced. To be fair, it is his house in the first place, so him walking in wouldn't matter as much, but they were in Itachi's room, which Izumi shared with him. She gave him a playful smirk. You thought I'd forget you, huh? I like you more than you think, you know. Then if you do, I'd like to ask for a favor. A favor? She asked before she face changed into a flirtatious smile. She leaned forward a bit. And what might that be? You let me and my friends eat here. Why? She blurted out before thinking. That kinda response blew her for a loop. I like chicken here and my friends wanted us to eat out. That's why I chose here since I was tired of eating ramen. Her expression turned back to her usual smirk. Are you sure you don't want anything to drink? It'll be on the house and I won't tell Azumi. I'm good. Will you do the favor or not? I don't have all day. That's not really how you ask for a favor, you know? She pointed out. But sure. I love you all anyway, so it won't be much trouble. I'll get you a seat in the back, but you'll have to share the section with another shinobi. Another shinobi? Yep. Just like you, she wanted to be by herself so she paid for it, unlike you. She's also quite popular. So it's a woman who likes drinking. She wants to be by herself, probably because of that popularity she possesses. And she can pay for a section at this bar. Sasuke thought, as his mind spins, gathering all the information that he was being told. He used that information and silently knew that it was the slug princess who they brought here, to Konoha. He knew that she wasn't going to become the Hokage just because of how she was acting on their way back from that small village. I'll still take the favor. I think I might know who she is. Well, okay. Bring your friends in here while I set everything up. She told him, standing up from her seat. The Uchiha nodded, opening the door and beckoning his friends to come inside. When the former shinobi left, Naruto turned to Sasuke. I still don't know why we're eating here. It can't be better than Ichiraku's, that's for sure. We're being fair, Naruto. Sakura cut in, knowing Sasuke would most likely ignore him and cause the latter to get mad. You've been choosing where we eat since we've gotten teammates. It's someone else's turn now. Naruto didn't care and turned away with a pout. It doesn't matter when ramen is the best food ever invented. Ramen for brains, Sasuke mutters, keeping his back to the talking duo. Though, Naruto still heard him all the same. Ha? You wanna repeat that? You idiot. Sasuke slightly turned to Naruto. Who are you calling an idiot? This is coming from a guy who can't even do the Academy clone jutsu. Sakura turned away, lightly giggling at the joke, which made Naruto even angrier. I can do it. Just you watch. Naruto performs 4 hand signs that will let him use the jutsu. Then he yells, Clone Jutsu. Puffs of smoke appear and out came 4 barely moving clones and disfigured clones. This caused Sakura to started laughing out loud. Just as the disfigured clones dispersed, Sakuma came back into the room. Alright, I've got things set up for you. One of my employees will direct you to a table and I suggest you guys keep the noise down. This is a place for grown-ups after all. The 3 turned to walk out the door when Sasuke spoke. That sounds stupid. If you're old enough to kill, you're old enough to go to a grown-up place. The door closed behind him when he finished, leaving the office back into its normal silence. The trio was seated in a section of the bar and was given menus to choose their food. While the others were looking through the menu, Sasuke was scanning the area with keen eyes. He was looking to see if his theory was correct about Tsunade being here. If so, he'd get Naruto to help convince her to become Hokage, knowing that she wouldn't unless Naruto could convince her with his unusually successful way of words. His eyes narrowed when he found the end of blonde pigtails. Gotcha. He muttered. XXX. Land of Earth. Okay. I've got the rest of these tags set up. Obito thought, just materializing from using Kamui to teleport back from the other shinobi nations. The starless night had only the moon to give it brightness since there weren't any clouds covering it. Even without clouds, the wind tussled through Obito's black cloak that covered up his Uchiha clan symbol on his back. When he was out of the country, and it wasn't an official mission, he'd make sure to not reveal he was a Konoha shinobi unless someone looked close enough at facts. Like what Yugura figured out when seeing Obito's Sharingan. Suddenly, he felt his chakra being pulled on, signaling to him that his summons was trying to communicate with him. He teleported shortly after activating his Mangekyo, appearing in front of his main long-distance scout summon. What did you find? The person carrying our target is traveling under the ground in a short burst. They seem to be carrying him to the Bear Country. Perhaps their base is located there. Unfortunately, you won't be alive to know. Obito turned to find the hooded man on a tree branch across from them. For some reason, I feel like I've heard that before. You seem less afraid than you were last time we fought. I was never afraid of you. I don't even know what you look like. That's the point of the gimmick, he said, gesturing to his hood. If I wanted you to see my face, then I'd have this for no reason. That's quite the tactless remark. The man chuckled at the response. Tact, huh? To me, tact is the ability to tell someone to go to hell and make them look forward to the trip. That's one fucked up way to put it, Obito told him. Who the hell are you? I know you're an Uchiha. Am I though? The man mused. I could have easily just stolen some Sharingan out of a grave. It could have been even your parents. Anyone ever tells you that if you pull enough strings, you'll end up pulling ropes? I only take advice from a single person. And he's told me to not take advice from anyone. If someone tells you to never take advice from anyone, should you take his? Though Obito couldn't see it, the man glared. You're quite witty when you want to be. You don't know a damn thing about me. HN. At the grunt, Obito regarded his summon but kept his eyes on the hooded man. He's trying to distract me. Go and keep eyes on Black Zetsu. The owl summon nodded and took flight, quickly going out of sight. How does he know about Black Zetsu? The man thought, going through his encounters with anyone from the Leaf, that he could have given this information to. I have two options set out in front of me. Obito thought, realizing what he needed to do. On one hand, if he stayed and fought the hooded man, then he would find out who he was and see how much of a threat he is. On the other hand, if he left, he would eliminate the biggest threat known to man, which is Black Zetsu. It wasn't because Black Zetsu himself was dangerous, it is the fact that he is the one who can summon Kagaya, someone he wasn't confident he could win against. He knew that he needed the 10 tails to do that, and that all he had to do was keep one of the tailed beasts safe, or just flat out kill all the Akatsuki members and prevent them from collecting the tailed beasts. But for some reason, his mind told him that the future generation needed to be stronger for something that would have happened had Naruto defeated Kagaya. So for now he would stick by his decision to the very end. I'll stay. Obito decided internally. He had his summons to keep his eyes on Zetsu, so if he ended this quickly, he should be able to catch up before Zetsu got out of the country. Out of nowhere, Obito threw a kunai with an explosive tag on it at the base of the tree right beside the hooded man. Surprised, he turned to the kunai just as it exploded, sending him flying back, though he was able to put his guard up in time. Just as he lowers his guard to see, Obito appears right in front of him and slams his foot into his gut, which sent him tumbling into multiple tree branches. Obito kept on the attack, going through multiple hand signs. Fire style, Fireball Jutsu. A giant fireball got launched from the Kamui user, its hot flames heating and taking water from trees as it neared the hooded man. When it touched the forest, it caused a huge explosion and black smoke to rise over the impact. Obito landed silently on the side of a tree just outside of where his fireball hit. Obito looked down as he noticed the ground below him get red, only to see that fire was shooting up at him that caused the tree to start to lean over. Fire style, Vanishing Attack. Obito backflipped of the tree just as the attack engulfed it and some surrounding trees. Obito was starting to descend to the ground when his opponent, who was behind him, aimed a fist at him. Sensing his chakra, Obito turned on a dime and easily stopped the fist with his palm before the two separated to land on the ground properly. Obito skidded to a halt on the grass-covered ground while his opponent landed on a tall tree branch. I'm having a hard time keeping up. He must be trying to finish me off quickly, unlike the last time we fought. I'll have to drag this out for a bit. He thought, activating his Mangekyo, glaring at Obito below him, who looked on in surprise. That's when he figured out his face was no longer covered and that Obito could see it. You aren't Madara. Who the hell are you? Obito's face had morphed from surprise to utter confusion. Damn it! Madara yelled as he rushed down to Obito, which seemed to snap him out of his stupor as he easily dodged and moved out of the way. Rushing forward again, Madara's eyes glowed red, signaling he was activating the powers of both his eyes. He suddenly rocketed forward, surprising Obito at the sudden burst of speed. They clashed, engaging in a taijutsu clash as Madara knew what Obito was going to do before he did it but wasn't fast enough to capitalize on the advantage, even with his boosted speed and strength from using kinetic energy. Blocking and redirecting multiple punches and kicks, Obito thought about the abilities his opponent was showing, noting that he didn't use these in their first fight. Pushing off, Obito flipped through the air while, at the same time, drawing multiple kunai and shuriken and throwing them with surprising precision. As his opponent dealt with that issue, Obito noticed that his chakra levels were a lot lower than when they first started. At first, I'm beating him pretty easy at taijutsu. Then, he activates his mangekyo and it's as though he's reading me like an open book and knows what I'm about to do before I do it. After that, his speed is boosted and his strikes are way harder. Is this some type of jutsu? Before Obito could think anymore, his opponent was rushing him with his speed even faster than before, causing a trail of dust to follow behind him. Obito easily sensed his movements and before he even got kicked away into a tree, carving into it. Instead of being disheartened knowing his loss was imminent, Madara was laughing as if he was the one winning. I've distracted you long enough. With that, he dissipated in a cloud of smoke. Smoke bomb, Obito muttered, letting him get away since he got what he stated for. He wanted to know if this guy was a threat or not, and since he knew his face, he could look in the Uchiha registry for that face. Overhead, a hawk's call resounded which caused Obito to look up and see a messenger bird coming down. Obito let out his arm and the bird landed on it before Obito took a piece of paper to read. As he read it, one of his owls landed on the branch beside him. Obito-san. Our target has passed over into the bear country. After thinking over the information he just received, Obito let out a frustrated noise. Discontinue the search and desummon. Something else has come up. Obito ordered and his summon nodded then took flight, going on to tell the others. Guess I'm heading back to the leaf. XXX. Land of hot water. A large humanoid figure looked over darkly as the three Akatsuki members were trying to figure out what was going on. Wind protruded from the green, swirling chakra, blowing back some of the closest trees from their roots while others farther away were barely hanging on. All the while the man in the middle was on one knee, panting from the heavy exertion from his already half-depleted chakra supply. That fact was caused him to be careless. He had learned how to be a sensory nin, so the fact that someone could sneak chakra bombs on him, without him noticing told him two things. 1. Perhaps they had really good chakra control but we didn't know how much one would need to hide bombs on someone. 2. His sensory abilities needed more practice than he thought. Whatever the case, Shursui was now down an arm and one of his legs was a bit injured. But he was glad of his circumstances, considering them anyway. He could have lost his entire arm and the only reason he didn't was that he pushed a bunch of his chakra to defend it, which inadvertently injured the muscles of his arm and caused him to lose a bunch of chakra since he was no chakra machine. He even has limits. Shursui gritted his teeth as a groan involuntarily escaped his mouth with his attempt to try and fully get to his feet. His slight fatigue and his foot certainly weren't helping the matter. To make matters worse, blood leaked from his eyes as they now started to strain due to the use of his Susanoo. Ending this fast is the best case scenario. He told himself now on his feet at last. Whatever this is, Deidara started as he took transformed clay bombs from his pouch. It has absolutely nothing on my art. The launched bombs sped into the Susanoo, rocking the entire area with dust rising after the fact. Artificial wind produced from the Susanoo pushed the dust back to reveal the green humanoid standing tall without even a scratch on it and Shursui looking no worse than he was before. It's time I take this seriously, Sasori said, tearing off his cloak to reveal a dark robe with a mask on top of his back. Deidara, take to the skies and fire your bombs at a distance when the opportunity presents itself. Shin, you're on the ground with me. He ordered. Who said you could order us around? Shin asked before Deidara could have his outburst that would ask the same thing. You wanna die? He asked, seemingly glaring at the man back. I'm not going to make you do anything. But if you end up dead, that's your problem. I'll follow along, Deidara said as he gathered up clay. I haven't used this for a fight since we destroyed that country, And besides, his attack now just disrespected my art. That's something that can only be repaid with death. From the sound of his voice, Sasori knew he would be holding another one of his art grudges. Then I'll join in this little assault as well, however, I'm doing things my way. Don't expect me to follow your lead. Do whatever you want, Sasori said, turning back to the task at hand. When he looked back, that's when he noticed a giant chakra arm speeding towards them. Get back! He yelled just before the three leaped back. With its intended targets gone, the hand slammed into the ground, breaking apart the earth. As the three landed at a distance, Shin summoned a mirage of weapons to his side. I'm ready, Deidara said as he threw a small bird on the ground before, in a puff of smoke, it transformed into a larger bird that was big enough for Deidara to get on comfortably. As Deidara took flight, Shin charged ahead at Shisui. Shisui directed his Susanoo arm at Shin as Sasori circled Shisui. Shin skidded to a stop, narrowly avoiding the hand that would have smashed him into the ground just as Sasori opened his mouth to release dozens of poison needles which bounced off the Susanoo without so much as a scratch. That defense is impressive. Sasori complimented as Shin's weapons too bounced off the Susanoo. The Susanoo arm once again slammed down to the ground, shattering it with a deafening boom. Dust rose from the impact, covering the lower half of the Susanoo and the Akatsuki members on the ground. Fire style, fireball jutsu! He exclaimed, releasing a powerful fireball after weaving the required hand signs. The attack shot toward Shin as the ethereal creature's size started to sway. It was revealed to Sasori and Deidara that Shisui had left his defense as seen how he rushed Sasori from the dust. Sasori's metallic tail thrust forward at the approaching Uchiha, who easily caught the movement with his Mangekyo. He gripped his Tanto as he lifted off the ground using his speed to make him faster. Uchiha style, fire slash. Just before they collided, Shisui had pushed chakra through his blade while simultaneously changing its nature into the fire. This gave his opponent no time to change direction nor move its weapon. The attack had ripped through the tail and sliced the back of Sasori in half while also catching each side on fire. The Uchiha skidded to a halt meters away from Sasori but had no time to rest as clay bombs from Deidara rained from above with him rushing behind them. Shisui had activated his Susanoo once more, though it was only a rib cage that surrounded his immediate form. Pushing chakra in his feet, he launches through the bombs infesting the airspace between the two shinobi, setting them off. He's going through each one of them. Deidara gritted out just before Shisui went through the last one and shot through the black smoke caused by his bombs unharmed, reaching for him with the Susanoo fading away. Shisui disappeared in a puff of white smoke just before reaching Deidara, revealing that he had been fighting a shadow clone. Wind-style ninja art, Divine Wind. The smoke disappeared around Deidara to reveal a large tornado of wind. The strong wind uprooted countless trees and sucked up any soft object nearby like Sasori's presumably dead body and torn up earth caused by the battle. Deidara gritted his teeth as he hung onto his claymade bird as they both were getting sucked into the huge vortex. An idea formed in his head as he drew closer to the vortex. He filled his bird up with more chakra almost to the point of it overloading, then commanded it to rush towards the tornado. He leaped off it as it started to follow the command and rushed toward the tornado. He was still being sucked up towards the attack since he had nothing to hold on to but was confident that his attack would reach the tornado before he did. His confidence was spot on when the tornado suddenly turned red then exploded, sending searing heat and a large explosion that spread a kilometer. The explosion destroyed anything in the immediate vicinity and sent everything else flying back meters. From an onlooker's perspective, it would have looked like a small nuke had gone off. Parts of the ground looked charred with steam coming from just about every tree that wasn't destroyed as the air was still hot, causing the water in multiple leaves to evaporate. Shisui, who was close to his technique, dropped to his knees coughing hard as blood ran down his face from his eyes dripping on the charred earth. He had seen exactly when the attack was about to blow and luckily put his Susanoo up just in time to prevent his death or at the very least put him out of the fight. His Susanoo didn't progress to its full armored stage and only had the skeleton form that protected him, which had taken a lot of effort to use because of his body condition and his basic practice with the technique. The grinning head of the skeletal Susanoo simmered out of existence at Shirsui's call. Still, on his hand and knees, Shirsui lifted his head to take a look around him. Shirsui's eyes widened as multiple scalpels shot at him. His eyes gave him unique reaction time, and with that, he summoned a small part of the Susanoo ribcage just before the attack hit him. Shirsui kept in a painful groan as his eyes began to strain again with the use of his Susanoo. His attacker had lost his Akatsuki cloak, showing his pale skin, which had several burn marks from being hit by Shirsui's fireball. 2 down, 1 to go. Shirsui thought, getting to his feet with painful groans but not removing his Susanoo. Hearing sounds of someone walking on his other side, Shirsui turned to see a red-headed teen in an Akatsuki cloak. Another member? Shirsui didn't know if his body could handle fighting another. Especially with the unknown abilities each one seemed to possess. It has been a while that I had to use this, he said as a scroll slipped from the inside of his cloak and into his hand. He held it out for all to see as Shirsui finally made it to his feet, slightly panting. The scroll unraveled slightly to reveal a seal before a puff of smoke erupted that, once gone, showed the missing third Kazekage as a puppet. This is what he looks like. He looks younger than me, Shirsui thought, putting his guard up as his Susanoo flickered away once more. Using it in a short burst helped Shirsui from losing his vision since, for some reason, his eyes would heal if he let them take a break. I don't know how much longer I can hold out. Itachi, come quickly, he said quietly. Chapter 33. Tension in the air thickened as each shinobi eyed each other, watching, observing for even the slightest movement. For the Akatsuki members had realized that this Uchiha would be a serious hindrance to their goal as a whole organization. Sasori had recognized that danger as soon as his puppet, Hirako, had been effortlessly destroyed with a single strike from a severely fatigued and borderline crippled opponent. Seeing how his arm dangled lifelessly to his side with blood all over it. Though, the only reason that was even the case was because of his opponent underestimating their skill and not going all out from the start, which allowed Deidara to tag him. Even then the Uchiha still had some fight left in him, even though his chakra supply had been cut in half by the time he actually started trying, which had caused his power to only be half of what it would be. Regardless of fighting 3 Akatsuki members simultaneously wasn't something to scoff at, since they usually went out in pairs to hunt for tailed beast. Shin was currently focused on one of the last Uchiha. He had been the first to encounter Shirsui, surprising him with a sneak attack that probably would have worked on any other shinobi. Shin knew that by himself he would have lost rather easily against this Uchiha, and it was for various but simple reasons. 1. He had no training in the traditional shinobu arts, meaning that all he used was copied taijutsu style and his strength that he naturally possessed due to his adaptive body. That couldn't do much against another skilled Sharingan user who was way too fast for him to keep up. He'd only been able to land any attack when the Uchiha was surprised or distracted. Something he wasn't proud to admit. 2. He barely had any of his usual weapons to fight within the case of a long-range fighter. He was one that needed to get close, and the way he could control his weapons was something that could get him close whilst distracting his opponent. There are more reasons as to why he was at a huge disadvantage, but that held no relevance until this fight. His silent call for Itachi was something he hoped would be answered. Conjuring any part of the Susanoo, however small, put strain on his eyes and his already heavily strained chakra supply. It was no doubt why this was the ultimate technique of the clan and why so few people had the Mangekyo Sharingan. It was difficult to handle and could kill someone ill-prepared to do so. Ha 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 ha. Shirsui turned ahead to see a boulder be moved over. Once it was removed, the owner of that laugh had become clear. It was Deidara. Shirsui gritted his teeth in almost silent frustration, though anyone looking at him could see it clear on his face. He had assumed that an attack that big would at least kill one of them, but his look seemed to be on the sour end of things as of late. He quickly took a look at the other 2 members, relieved to know that they hadn't moved an inch. He couldn't afford to get distracted and let them get close. He was sure that any attack would kill him if it hit. Art is truly an explosion. A masterpiece. Deidara yelled as it was shown to all that half of his cloak had got blown off, which showed his blue undershirt on one side of his body. He had been awed at how his art could truly be magnificent and have absolutely no flaws. And that wasn't even the full power of his art. All jutsu has a weakness. He told himself repeatedly. That was something Itachi told him, something he would never forget, not even in the heat of battle. He needed to use the more analytic side of his Sharingan instead of trying to brute force and outspeed his opponents who he knew vague information about. And that was at best. At the worst, they could be severely holding back and have some type of power that could kill him in an instant. It might sound like he was nitpicking or believing in what could happen at worst, but the ninja who survive all know that possibilities are endless in the way that chakra could be used. He simply had to be ready for anything. His eyes scanned Shin, once again noting the Sharingan around his body. Then he looked at Sasori, seeing the third Kazekage being controlled with visible churka threads. Then he looked to Deidara, who was holding clay between his hands, molding it. Ha! The sizable clay had turned into a large dragon in a puff of smoke, proving Shirsue's theory that they weren't trying their hardest. Shirsue's body stiffened when Deidara moved to mount the dragon, smirking at him confidently. Iron sand drizzle. Dozens of bullets made from the iron sand produced by the third Kazekage shot at Shirsue, expanding long in range. Shirsue looked behind him, an idea to counter already in his head. He disappeared with the body flicker, causing the sand to now speed towards Shin. Sasori's eyes narrowed at the strategy. He's smart. His opponent realized the position of each of his opponents and capitalized the best way anyone could. That wasn't something every shinobi could do. Before the iron sand could reach Shin, Sasori redirected its direction, bringing it back to its intended target, who had disappeared to a safe distance. Shirsue grunted as he, once again, brought up his Susanoo skeleton to defend himself from the attack. Thanks for keeping him in place, Sasori. Deidara complimented from above, readying an attack. Get a load of this art. His C2 dragon opened its jaw to release smaller versions of the original dragon. Wind style, pressure field. His Susanoo faded when an almost invisible force field made of wind pushed back all the sand bullets and the C2 dragons. But just as quickly as the jutsu activated, it disappeared, revealing Shirsue crouched on the ground with even more blood coming from his eyes. His Susanoo had taken a massive amount of his chakra. So much so that he felt like he would be out if he did at most 5 mid to high class jutsu. He felt drained, to say the least. His opponents looked like they were now just starting to try while he was basically down for the count. He was lucky his chakra control was as good as it was, so that he made it good with chakra he had. Despite that, he started the fight with just about half chakra, and despite it being for a good cause, which was to save his arm, it had made his attacks weaker than normal, which didn't do any favors considering that at the same time he had lost the ability to fight with his arm and one leg. That's when his mind wondered as to why he was still there. He had enough information in his mind to simply leave and tip off the leaf while keeping low until he healed. There was a problem with that, however. And that was the fact that he had no way to prove that, because he knew that as soon as he left, then that place would be raided and hidden, or at the worst completely destroyed. Sure, he could have a Noichi or another Yamanaka to prove his claims, but that would take time as he had to be healed enough for it not to damage him. But regardless of how humble he was, he knew that he was a valuable shinobi of Konoha, as well as one of the last living Uchiha. That wasn't the main reason he was staying, however. He had a feeling that there was something more underneath of what he'd already seen. He really only searched one part of the place and had yet to make his way up those stairs he saw Shin on. He knew that simply having a feeling was suicide for a shinobi. Especially those that have no proof of actually coming through. He shook his head internally to rid himself any more thoughts. He needed a plan to help his situation, a way to, at the very least, take out one of them. That's when he decided no more Susanoo, and he'd have just enough chakra to use Koto Amatsukami once. That one use would also lower his chakra to only being able to use 2 more mid-class jutsu from his original mid to high class estimate. Just as he thought this, he heard a flap that sounded like wings. The blonde one. He realized only to look up and see smaller C2 dragons spearheading towards him. His eyes could only widen before the bombs leveled the already leveled area. Summoning Jutsu. A screeching caw broke through the explosion as a large crow stood where Shisui once was. The giant's summoning generated strong winds that picked up dust as it took flight, aiming for Deidara. On its head was a heavily fatigued Shisui who was panting as if he had been running forever. Usually this was a high-level jutsu and it was, but he had combined the two mid-class jutsu he knew he could do and used the last he could. The Summon Ting Jutsu. He and Itachi shared the same summoning and this had been one of the few times he had used it. In this case he needed to use it. How stupid can you be to come straight towards me? The blonde yelled as he released even more of his C2 bombs. Hundreds of crows went in different directions as the separated from the original summoning. This not only distracted Deidara but also changed the target of the bombs which had gone after one of the crows before exploding. Deodar's covered up as what looked like 100 crows circled him and cawed loudly. He couldn't see nor hear what was going on, but that was when Shisui appeared in front of him. His being was fading in and out as crows appeared from his body while others took its place. But Deidara could only see Shisui's Mangekyo Sharingan. He'd never admit it, but in that moment he had realized that the Sharingan was also art. The red blazing color and the pupils that seemed to lock onto its target and practically read their soul. Koto Amatsukami, Meijo. In an instant, Deidara had lost consciousness. He awoke in a gasp, his heavy eyes already searching his surroundings. What he saw shook him. It was about everyone he knew from the hidden stone. But all that mattered little when he saw the heavily disappointed face of the Tsuchikage. That was also when he noticed he couldn't move. He looked down to see that his hands were tied behind his back and that his whole body from head to toe was completely covered in tight ropes. He tugged on the ropes in an attempt to break free. This, however, only proved to worsen his situation as the already tight rope seemed to tighten even more that it was noticeable to anyone that it was digging into his skin. You put this on yourself. You deserve this, you treacherous coward. I hope you burn for eternity. What you did can never be forgiven. Burn in hell. These insults and many more were thrown at the struggling Akatsuki member. The insult kept going, now loud enough that it felt like they were echoing. It made Deidara angrier and more frustrated than he would have usually been as the ropes compressed into him even more. Now he could no longer move his shoulder. Shut up! All of you! They continued even more loudly than before. The exact opposite of what he wanted, which only furthered angered him. I don't care what you worthless people think. I did it for my art. Art. That was when he smelled something burning, and now that he said that he could feel something underneath his feet. He looked down to see it was wood that was quickly catching on fire. Black smoke rose up to his face, dimming his vision and causing him to cough from inhaling the smoke. He tried closing his eyes, but the insults had no gotten so loud that he could have mistaken it for someone right next to him, yelling in his ear. His eyes watered from the smoke that was nearly 4 times its original size. He could barely see anything, and all he was breathing in was the smoke, which worsened his couching fit. Fire! His mind screamed, reminding him of why all this was happening. Ignoring the irritation in his uncovered eye, he looked down to see that the fire was about to reach his feet. He could feel the heat of the flames, the taste of the unbearable air, the smell of the fire burning the wood, hear the raging fire as well as the insults that had never stopped, and he could see everything. And that became scary once Shisui's Mangekyo Sharingan appeared up in the normal dark, void sky. It brightened the whole area into a blood red while the sky itself seemed to be bleeding. It looked like some sort of hell that would only be reserved for the scummiest of bastards that would grace the devil's door. He could do nothing as flames started to crawl up his leg. He gritted his teeth and writhed in pain, struggling to free himself somehow, which only further got him trapped. Once that flames reached his chest, he could take no more. The unbearable air, unbelievable flames, and the never-ending insults that drove deep with the disappointed face of his old master, the Tsuchikage. That was what was going on inside of the genjutsu that Shisui placed on Deidara. In reality, Deidara was face down on the ground. With how the ground looked, it was evident that he fell down right after the genjutsu was placed. Shisui was doing no better, arguably worse. He had been on the ground just about the same amount of time that Deidara had. The difference was that he was conscious and very much aware of the two figures that made their way over to him, killer intent leaking from them. "Heh, guess this is it." He breathed out. "Hopefully this'll save Naruto some trouble." Just as they said. Shin appeared beside him, looking down at him. "The Kotoama Tsukumi is unescapable. But it seems you couldn't handle such a thing." A grin appeared on his face. "Don't worry, I'll make sure to give it a hood use in my collection. No one has time for any of that. Move aside," Sasori said, holding up a sunban with poison dripping from it. Just as he moved in to kill, a wall of rushing water made its presence known as it smashed into the ground. Both members jumped away just before a blur grabbed Shisui and disappeared before the waves slammed into the ground. "Damn it! He got away!" Shin yelled, skidding across the ground before stopping across from his partner. "This is why I don't like waiting," Sasori muttered. He glanced over at the still unmoving Deidara. "Let's get him up. We either need to move this stuff or destroy it." "We aren't destroying my clones," Shin stated, walking over to Deidara. All Sasori did was nod. His mind had went back to Shisui. All he could say was interesting. "Triple X. Thanks for the save," Shisui thanked with a low voice. He was unbelievably tired as he hung off the back of his best friend. "Why were you fighting members of the Akatsuki?" It seemed like Itachi would get straight to the point as always. Even though Shisui didn't feel like explaining, he started anyway, knowing that Itachi was just trying to help. After explaining what happened, he was met with silence as Itachi absorbed everything that he heard. Then he frowned a bit. "You had enough information to just leave. With how fast you are, I doubt they would have been able to catch up. So why did you stay and fight?" Shisui closed his eyes and took a breath before continuing. "I felt like it was something more to what I'd already seen. It was a hunch, I know, but something just felt off to me." With that, Itachi nodded. "Personally, I would have just left. But I trust your judgment, and even though you didn't get the information you were after, you got valuable information on 3 of their members and you came out alive. We'll call that a win." Shisui gave him a tired smile. "What are the chances Izumi will scold me?" "Very likely." The both cracked up at Itachi's blunt but honest answer. When they died down, Shisui was just about to go to sleep when Itachi called him. "Can you tell me a little bit more about the one with the Sharingan?" His Mangekyo flashed dangerously. "He's caught my attention." Chapter 34. A tired sigh escaped a certain Nara's mouth as he put away yet another giant stack of paperwork. By this time, a Hokage should have been appointed and they could be stuck with the horrid paperwork that he had to be doing. The village still had to be run without a Hokage, with people trying to get loans from the treasury, people looking to buy homes and businesses, reading mission reports and stamping it, and many more. It was a busy job that would usually require a Hokage to stay the night and finish, which was the exact reason Shikaku would never want to be Hokage and why he fully understood why Jiraiya and Obito didn't either. His head landed on the wooden desk with a thud as Shikaku let his neck rest. He had been doing paperwork for hours on end and he didn't know if he could anymore. He resolved to find someone capable to get the position so he could go back to relaxing. He missed going home to his wife even though she nagged the hell out of him. He was sure he'd rather hear that than doing paperwork. She had a nice side at night that he thoroughly enjoyed. 3 knocks at the door take his attention, causing him to look up to regard it. "Come in," he called out. He was slightly surprised to see Kakashi walk in with a note in hand and an individual tied up on the floor. Kakashi feels the ANBU hidden in the room shift a bit but do nothing. He knows they're looking to see if the body will move or not. "Kakashi, what's going on?" "Shikaku-san." Kakashi nodded before he started explaining. A group of people dressed like this, he gestured to the unconscious person tied up, attacked me and tried to take away my kurgan. I defeated them and tried to interrogate them, but they wouldn't talk about who sent them. The rest are tied up outside, and I have my ninkan watching their every move. Scorpion, tiger. Shikaku called out after listening and digesting the information. Two of the ANBU in the room dropped down and bowed in front of the Hokage's desk. Shikaku-sama. I need you both to go and wake up both Inoichi Yamanaka and Ibiki Marino and lead them to the Konoha Intelligence Division. Tell them it's urgent. He ordered. Both ANBU nodded and made swift exits. That's not all I have to report, however. Kakashi said as he held up a piece of folded paper and handed it to Shikaku. While Shikaku read through it, Kakashi made a shadow clone and tasked it with leading his ninken to the interrogation division and drop of the masked ninja when Ibiki and Inoichi arrived. He's planning something, Kakashi said, seeing the scowl that appeared on Shikaku's face before he slammed the paper down on the wooden desk. His mind wandered to why Danzo would want to call the daimyo back to the village. He must be wanting to appeal to him in some way to become the Hokage. What could that way be? Shikaku had no idea. But he knew Danzo had something planned, and whatever that was needed to be stopped. Thanks for the information, Kakashi. Keep this between me and you. I'll inform trusted people in the morning. Shikaku said. He wanted a night to think over what he was going to do. Kakashi nodded and left after saying goodnight, leaving Shikaku to his thinking. He stayed in the office for a couple of minutes before packing his things to get going. He didn't think of much but knew he could by the time morning came around. Danzo was such a snake. XXX. Obito's POV. Obito was taking his time walking through the village. He knew he had things to do like look through the Uchiha registry and go back to Yagura and tell him that he found out who was controlling him. Withholding the information could bring trouble if Yagura thought he was doing it because of the leaf. He shook his head to rid himself of those thoughts. He needed one night to relax his mind and his body. Sure, he didn't need to eat or sleep to live, but each felt nice to do. He felt like he needed it to, considering he hadn't slept nor ate, or even rested since Jiraiya took Naruto and Sasuke with him on his trip. That was a month ago. Once his thoughts lifted, he could see that he was standing right in front of his door. And that was when he remembered he didn't have his key. He sighed, knowing that if he went inside using Kamui he would probably scare his wife. He knocked on the door instead after a bit of thinking. The door peeked open to show half of his wife's face. Her eyes widened in recognition before she opened the door fully, allowing him access inside. He came inside wordlessly and sat down to take off his shinobi sandals. Just like always, the atmosphere was awkward, but not to an uncomfortable extent. Really, it was because the two didn't have much to say to each other. They've been married for a couple of years but didn't interact as much as they should. Both were the quiet types, with Obito only showing emotion with people he felt comfortable with like Kakashi, Rin, Asuma, Guy, and Anko. Most of the time he was just as silent as he was when he was running the Akatsuki from the shadows. Would you like me to reheat dinner? He heard the question just as he took off his other sandal. If you feel like it. I'm not that hungry though. He turned around and stood up when he noticed what his wife was wearing. Were you in bed? She pushed her drooping hair from her face. I was, but I wasn't asleep. She looked away, her hair blocking her face. I kinda wait to see if you'd come home or not. Before going to bed. Oh. You don't need to do that. You should get your rest. He told her as they headed to their bedroom. Okay. After that they two didn't talk too much more before heading to bed. XXX. The next day. Hokage's office. Shikaku had come in early for the first time ever that morning, going through every report he found on his desk. The office door flung open to reveal a slightly tired-looking Inoichi, with papers in his hand. Shikaku, we found something. He told him seriously, putting the papers on the desk. At first we thought that those guys Kakashi brought in were enemies from other nations, but we found out that they're from Konoha, sent by Danzo. By Danzo? Why? The same thing Kakashi reported, to steal his eye. That's all we know. What's your call? Scorpion. A masked shinobi appeared bowing before Shikaku. I need you to go and tell the secretary to call in elite members from the Inuzuka, Aburame, and Hyuga to report in here immediately. The shinobi nodded and left right after. The team of clan members were assembled shortly after and were sent on a mission to see if there is any trace of Danzo at the hideout. The team had 2 Aburame members with 1 Inuzuka and Hyuga. There is definitely a different smell from the captured ninjas. Hana Inuzuka noted as her and her partners sniffed the air. They had gotten the sense of each captured member and there was one more scent different than the one they got. She turned to the Hyuga on the team. Any residue chakra left? The Hyuga shook her head in reply, shutting off the Byakugan. I don't see anything but seals around the entrance like before. Perhaps they have something that takes chakra out of the area, or maybe he wasn't here for too long. Hayomi Hyuga, an elite member of the branch family, theorized. He definitely wasn't here very long. His smell is almost faded away while the other captured are strong. He must only appear here every once in a while. Why the other live here? It would certainly explain the bland food and ninja tools that was around. The canines had some strapped to their backs that were going to be looked over. My insects have found black hair that could either belong to that one ninja with black hair or it could be Danzo. One of the Aburame members said, after the confirmation from Hana. Looking at it, Hana said, I hope it's Danzo, but we can't go off that. See if you can find any more. She bent down to her canine's height. Look for any hair or anything else you can spot. That can be taken in as evidence and analyzed. With that said, the investigation continued. Meanwhile, Danzo was en route to the fire daimyo with Root backing him up. Danzo had gotten sick of waiting and waiting for his chance to be Hokage to come. Now, he was going to make it happen all by himself. The scouts ahead spotted the convoy and got his attention. The plan was to subdue his guards and put a genjutsu on the daimyo to consider him as Hokage and no one else. Then kill the guards while some of his Root escort the daimyo to the leaf like nothing ever happened. Just as Danzo and his foot put their plan into motion, a blur peeked from the shadows and watched as Root started to kill the guards. This blur was Itachi carrying a beaten and asleep Shisui on his back. Itachi had the itch to attack and kill Danzo but knew that if they found Shisui they would kill him or take his eyes, or both. Obito had told them to watch their backs even in the village. Anyone could be after their eyes since they were some of the last Uchiha. Itachi knew that he would risk his life to get to the daimyo's defense, but he couldn't risk someone like Danzo getting the Sharingan, so reluctantly, he left, but with a faster pace. He'd have to warn Shikaku or whoever the new Hokage was. Shikaku was looking through another report from Inoichi when Itachi walked into his office without knocking. Itachi had been one of the most respectful people he knew, so this had to be important. Danzo and other shinobi under his orders are attacking a convoy that has the daimyo in it. He might be planning on getting rid of the daimyo. Itachi explained. The step in Hokage's side before he called for Kakashi, Anko, Asuma, and Izumi to go and kill Danzo and his subordinates but tell his guards that they were sent by him to help get him to the leaf. The group of elites rushed through the dense forest with Kakashi leading his team leader. Damn it, just what the hell is Danzo planning? Anko seethed. She hated traitors more than anything, and all that came from a certain snake. Don't know. Kakashi answered, jumping of a tree branch. It's something big, that's for sure. The man's wanted to become Hokage ever since my father was appointed and the fourth died. Maybe he's going to kill the daimyo for never picking him. Asuma theorized. That's not really smart though. Izumi, the youngest one of the group, disagreed. Think about it, how would he gain anything from killing the daimyo? I've never been to any meetings, but I've heard rumors of the way the daimyo decides the Hokage. What if he's going to try and control him to make the daimyo choose him? Anko snorted. That'd be dumb. Why would he do something like that in a village full of Hyuga and sensory need? He'd have to use genjutsu and that could be easily detected and he'd be caught. I don't like the guy, but I can't say he is dumb. She's right. Kakashi nodded. The only way he'd be able to hide it is if he had a Sharingan. And even then, Master Jiraiya and Obito will be present in the meeting. I don't think he'd be able to hide it from them. The conversation was stopped right there as they could see the convoy going calmly on the dirt path. Nothing looked out of the ordinary. Izumi. Kakashi whispered. Yes, sir. She already knew what he was requesting. She activated her Sharingan looking for any genjutsu in the area. After all, a ninja couldn't be too careful, and even if they dismissed genjutsu on the daimyo, it could still be in the surroundings. Nothing I can find, she told him, turning off her Sharingan. Okay, let's drop down. They all did so at once, but a couple of meters in front of the convoy is to not surprise them and set them off. Why are you guys here? One of guards asked in monotone, his face completely impassive as if he had no emotions. He glanced at their attires before asking the question. Kakashi held up a scroll for him to grab. We were sent here by Shikako-sama. We're to make sure he travels to the leaf safely. Reading through the scroll, it was undeniable that Kakashi was telling the truth. That, however, won't be necessary. We've been doing just fine in taking care of the daimyo. And yet, Danzo slipped through. Anko muttered under her breath. Sorry, but I wasn't asking you, could we stay? Kakashi said, stopping the man from handing him back the scroll. I'm telling you we're here on an official mission and that we're staying. To the guard it looked as if Kakashi's eyes turned cold and calculating. Normally, one wouldn't have a problem with it. Is there something going on? The guard held out the scroll. No, there's no problem. You and your team are welcome to protect the daimyo until we reach the leaf. Good. He turned back to his team. Let's go with a normal formation. They nodded and did so. Nothing eventful happened after that, and the daimyo was going by a private and secure place to rest and unpack his things. The team of elites were back with Shikako telling them that nothing happened and they weren't able to track or see Danzo. Itachi couldn't have been lying. Izumi said aloud. There's no reason for him to. You're right. Kakashi agreed. See if you can find and talk to him. Perhaps he'd seen something else too. She nodded and excused herself, leaving everyone else back in the room. I have a plan. Shikako stated, immediately gaining the attention of everyone in the room. Shikako had the best plans and ideas in the leaf. He was even rumored to be smarter than Kage. It's one to assassinate Danzo and take down his new division, Root. And I'm going to need all of your help with a few additions. With that said, the group got planning and putting out ideas. The meeting with the daimyo wouldn't start till the next morning because he'd come down with a headache. Meanwhile, a silver-headed shinobi was using the shadows to his advantage like an elite. He split up with the Sound Four as their objectives had been different. He hoped that they'd succeed, for Sasuke was more important than his target, Rin Noara. She was important as well, since if they couldn't get Sasuke and couldn't get Tsunade, they could get the next best thing, which was her. She was rumored to be almost just as good with medical ninjutsu as Tsunade. He could say that was true considering he'd infiltrate the hospital before and seen her work. She was definitely deserving of her title as second best. He just hoped she would be enough to help Orochimaru. That was his plan. To sneak into the hospital and get out with the unconscious Rin. But how he was going to do that, he didn't know yet. He just needed something to happen, perhaps a distraction of a good magnitude would do. Fortunately, for some reason luck seemed to be on his side. Which was a good thing. Was that a good thing? Later that night the Sound Four are on a slanted rooftop, nearing the Uchiha compound, which was one of the big hotspots in Konoha. They were sitting still on the outskirts, checking the area around them. They had to be extra careful because of Orochimaru's recent invasion and that they were looking for the young brother of Itachi Uchiha and close cousin of Shisui Uchiha. Their master wasn't on the level of those two, so if caught, they would surely meet their end. Besides, they were also near the Hyuga compound, which in of itself was dangerous with the all-seeing Byakugan. How much longer are we going to have to stake out? Tayuya, the only female member of the group, asked with a bit of anger in her voice. They'd been like this for a couple of hours. It's getting fucking cold out here. Language. Jirobo slightly reprimanded, keeping his eyes on their surroundings. He was a bit cold too, but he kept quiet knowing how deep they were in enemy territory. Shut the hell up, fatso. You're cold too, with your shivering ass. She said a bit loudly. It was quite easy to rile her up. So unladylike. Jirobo muttered with a shake of his head. He wondered if her being a girl was a mistake. She heard the mutter, but before she could retort, Sakan interjected. Please don't start arguing. It's getting old. His tone was deep but calm as of now. But I see Tayuya's point. I think we should get a move on. No one has passed by in hours anyway. In typical fashion, Tayuya grunted before looking over to her last teammate. Well, that's 2 of 4. What do you think, Kadamaru? He spoke in a more laid-back and relaxed tone. I agree with you also. It's getting boring just sitting around here. Just like Sakan said, no one been around. Well, that settles that. Saying that, the redhead stood from her crouched position and leaped onto another roof, moving into the Uchiha district. She could have at least waited on everyone. Sakan muttered, leaping off the roof to catch up. The last 2 followed behind them. It seemed that they'd just go straight in regardless of the obvious danger. They just had to be careful. While that was happening, Sasuke was just entering the Uchiha estate he shared with all of his family except for Obito. I'm home. He called out, as he closed the door behind him and turned the front light on outside. When he got no response, he assumed everyone was out because none of his cousins would go to sleep unless they knew where he was, and if they were on missions they'd leave a note. Stretching a bit, he decided that they were a bit late and he was going to have the house to himself for a bit. Might as well get a snack. The Uchiha thought, walking over to his refrigerator and opening it to see what was inside. When he opened it, he found tomatoes, and more tomatoes. They really needed to go grocery shopping. They'd missed it because of that chaos that had been going on recently. His thoughts had went back to the conversation he and Naruto had with Tsunade back at the restaurant. Did they do enough to convince her that she needed to become Hokage? He didn't know. But he gave himself a pat on the back for trying. It may have been a bit out of character for him, but seeing all those people die at the town had convinced him that this needed to happen. All those people dying just for Tsunade to run off and get drunk somewhere was something he wouldn't let happen. Just like he'd find and kill the people that killed his family so their deaths could be avenged. To rid himself of the thoughts, he bite into one of the largest tomatoes before closing the refrigerator. The sensation was pure bliss to the slightly stressed young ninja. So much had happened in the past months, and that he might be enjoying the tomato more than usual. Maybe the quiet of the household helped too. He started upstairs to his room, still munching and enjoying the taste of his tomato. Just as he took another bite, he passed Shirsue's room, which besides the multitude of guest rooms and training room was the only other room besides his. He peeked inside to see no one was inside, but the light had been left on, which was something the other Uchiha did often. Turning it off, he left and continued down the hall until he reached his room. By that time his tomato had been all eaten, and he looked at his hands with a tinge of a pout, wishing he had brought more than one. Taking his mind off of that, he went inside his room and turned his light on before walking over to his desk where he placed his weapons on. It wasn't necessarily junky, but it wasn't in order per se. As he got ready for bed, he had no idea that 4 Jounin-level individuals were watching his movements. Suddenly a blur smashed through his window when he was far enough away from his weapons. The figure launched at him before sending him into the wall with a punch to the abdomen. Who knew you were this weak? And here I thought I'd be getting some type of enjoyment from this. The figure chuckled as Sasuke slowly got to his feet, grunting. The figure appeared to be Sakan as Sasuke looked up, almost expecting it to be someone from the Akatsuki. No, they were after Naruto. He reminded himself. As he did, more members came through the window, the less fast like. Already down, huh? Kadamaru remarked, being the first to see Sasuke's condition. What a weakling. His other teammates seemed to agree as they looked on with smirks at Sasuke, who had finally made it to his feet. His stomach felt a bit weak. Maybe he shouldn't have ate that tomato and was glad he didn't get more than one. Hee hee, Tayuya chuckled, stepping forward. You're coming with us, brat.